It's a podcast. You're listening to Gorehead and The Wiener. All right. Welcome to Gorehead and The Wiener. Today we are talking about The Fly.
The Fly.
Yes. And I guess in case anyone forgets, I just like to do a little intro before we start. But basically, this podcast is just to help expand my movie catalog, my horror movie catalog specifically, movie by movie, usually at my expense, so that I can eventually watch horror and gore without exploding. So
Controlled trauma is what we're going
controlled trauma. I'll probably stop introducing this at some point, but
for here. It's
I don't
good for
know.
now. Make sure
Just
people know what we're rambling about before we just get into
it's
the
kind of
nonsense.
a random premise, so
Yes, yeah, it requires explanation.
it requires a bit of explanation. So, yeah, this one was actually my choice because I'm trying to delay watching the most gory movie that Chris keeps trying to get me to watch. So
We found
I
a
chose
happy
this,
middle ground.
and I still hated it.
I can't wait for you to describe how you felt after you watched it.
It was not. Anyways, I won't give too much away yet, because we're not in spoiler territory quite yet. So,
No.
I'll
Yeah.
I'll let you talk about the intro, Chris.
All right, yeah. So for anyone who's not familiar with the David Cronenberg classic The Fly, there are horror elements, but it is described as an actual love story. A classic love story where man meets woman, man falls in love with woman, man turns himself into fly, man tries to turn woman into fly, but tragically ends up barfing all over the place, melting body parts, and fusing himself with a giant piece of metal. The end.
So beautiful.
Classic love story.
I guess that was spoiler. Sorry, was wrong.
Oh
Spoiler.
crap! I did it again. I did that last time in the intro. Well, in case you couldn't guess, it's a movie about a guy turning himself into a fly. That is the most
I
basic
mean,
description of the movie.
it's kind of hard to spoil The Fly. Everyone knows what happens,
It's
so
in the name. It's very famous too. Everyone knows. I'm
it's
sure
in the
many people.
trailer.
Yeah, many people have seen The Fly picture or
Yeah,
something of The Fly just because it's such a famous body horror movie that
yeah.
it's just kind of embedded into culture because they make fun of it all the time in like The Simpsons and whatever Family
Oh
Guy. Like
yeah.
it's
And
in the world.
funnily enough, they made fun of the original The Fly in The Simpsons, not this fly.
Oh.
Unless they did an additional episode of it, but we'll get into all that stuff. This is going to be a very meaty episode.
Ooh, yes, lots of flesh in
Lots
this
of
episode.
flesh.
Lots of flesh to get through.
So I guess, yeah, before I complain too much, well, I guess this is kind of complaining. I'm going to talk about the gore summary
Oh,
and
please do. Please tell me
and
how
the
it made you
rating.
feel. I want to know. I want you to tell the audience what you told me after you finished watching it.
I never want to watch this again. That's what I said, I think. Did I say something else?
About how it actually made you physically nauseous and you said
Oh, it
that
did.
your stomach hurt until the
I
next
was
day.
I was still
texted
sick the
you.
next day. I remember going to work and I was eating burritos with my coworkers
Nice juicy burrito.
on Monday morning, and they were like, "Oh yeah, so what did you get up to?" And it's like, I watched The Fly." And then I went on. I basically just started ranting about how disgusting it was while we were eating burritos. So
It's the best time. All this
yes,
stuff falling out of them. Just people. Just, of your
yeah,
double beef
I was like
burrito.
eating this disgusting burrito as I still feel nauseous from watching The Fly the previous day. So, anyways, if that's any indication, it's not a 5 out of 5 on the Gore Wiener scale. So,
Right.
just to
So there's
give
hope.
everyone a little rundown in case you're just randomly jumping in on this episode, um, I try to rate the movie before we actually get deep into like the juicy stuff about it. So just in case you are someone like me that is afraid of gory movies, you could use this as like a little bit of um a warning or like an idea to understand of like what you'd be getting yourself into before if you decide to watch it. So that being said, I gave it a 3 out of 5 on a gore wiener scale, which means if there were 5 gore wieners in a room, 4 me's in a room, only 3 of them could watch the whole thing, basically. Uh, 2 of them would have been, they would have ran away or they'd be puking in a corner. So we'll see.
I just pictured like a version of being John Malkovich, but there's just a bunch of you. Like, there's just like 5 of you sitting in a room, just like all watching it, but kind of reacting slightly differently.
I'd love to see that.
That is, oh my gosh, that's amazing. You need to just like green screen yourself into like 5 different sections of your couch.
Oh, hey, that's actually good for every rating. I can do a variation of that green screen effect. How many gore wieners?
And they're like,
So
oh, and you could like take away one of them. They run away for the rating.
Yes!
If it's so it starts with 5, and then like 4 gory wieners, 3 gory wieners, and you have to make it sound like the count from Sesame Street.
3 gory wieners.
Which is actually thematically appropriate for a horror movie based podcast.
It's perfect.
People get to see how the meat's made over here because we don't know what we're doing, so we make it up on the fly. The fly.
Hey! Okay, let's continue. We're just going on random tangents.
The ramble has begun.
So 3 out of 5 gory wieners. I took 1 point off for an arm breaking scene, a compound fracture, actually, to be specific. 0.5 of a point off for fingernails being taken off. If you've listened to our episode on Oculus, you know how I feel about that.
You have strong opinions on fingernails.
And then I just took an additional 0.5 off for general nastiness.
Je ne sais quoi.
Well, that je ne sais quoi. Disgusting.
General nastiness. That you should do like the NPR ratings for like, you know, disturbing imagery. General nastiness. The Milligan ratings.
The Milligan rating. It's arm breaking, fingernails, and general nastiness.
Oh, we can't let the kids see this. General nastiness.
There's only 3 gory wieners could handle this one. I don't know. Mavis. I don't know. Mavis.
Mavis. We'll go back down to Billy Bob and see if he freaks out and hides in the shed again.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so anyways, gonna get into the details about the gore. The gore details. So just an overview of the specific gore that happens in the movie that I kind of noticed.
I just read your first 8 points. It is the greatest 3 words put together.
Test monkey explodes. So, Jeff Goldblum, his name is Seth in the movie. He's testing out his device, and basically it doesn't go so well, and you basically just see a bunch of like writhing intestines inside of a pod. So he
tries to teleport gory. A baboon. The baboon goes from a fuzzy baboon to an inside out baboon.
Yep. And then the next one is the arm breaking scene, which I couldn't watch at all. So that's a full point off. Full point off for that one.
Real close up.
And I yeah. Anyways,
compound fractures are real gross. I hate looking at compound fractures.
So yeah, that happens. And then fingernails fall out, and it's all goopy and gross.
It squirts all over the place. when he
It's so
squeezes the.
squirty.
Oh, it's so David Cronenberg. Oh, there's so many of the actors in interviews. They all mention it's like, yeah, I know that I was going to be having to deal with a lot of goop because it was David Cronenberg, but I didn't expect all of the stickiness.
All of the stickiness. Well, yeah, there's a lot of goop and stickiness.
Yeah,
And yeah, then after that, the next ones are Jeff's body just generally deteriorating. Body
loses
parts fall off. He loses
so,
his ears. His fingers fuse together, which is pretty gross.
teeth all fall out.
Yeah,
He
and
starts pulling them out.
oh yeah, but
Yeah.
this I don't know why Jeff Goldblum doing stuff isn't as scary. Like him pulling out his own teeth. I was like, I don't know why I'm okay with this. It's just
Well, it's like
Jeff.
it's like he has like this childlike fascination with everything, where like another
Yeah.
actor may act it like far more horrified, but like he's like part of him's horrified, but other part of him is like really interested and like intrigued by it. He's like this little kid. He's like, oh, my teeth are coming out. Let's see how many I can pull out, and he keeps them all in like a little cup, and he has them all nicely
Yeah.
in his
He's
medicine cabinet that he
he's
calls
got
the
them in his
Museum of
medicine cabinet.
Brindle.
He puts like his ear in there and it's like, what the hell?
That
Um
that would be a good scene to just slowly go through to try to figure out what each body part is in there. Because yeah, there's multiple bits that we don't see
multiple
fall off that
bits.
have fallen off.
If you happen to be a person that enjoys gore, then there you go. Have fun. I mean, I'm not going to go do that, so enjoy yourselves, you freaks.
You guys are
Like how you're
psychos.
just like casually like, that'd be a fun scene to go and count how many
Yeah.
body parts are hidden behind Jeff's medicine cabinet. Go
One day,
count them.
Emma. One day, you too will want to slowly page through to see what body parts are in the medicine cabinet. We'll come back like a year from now, and then we'll just do a recording of you watching all the slow bits.
Gross. I've not even done my list. So then the next part. So now then
Oh,
Jeff is in like his full body suit and his body is just like deformed and lumpy and his face is slimy. I don't know, that's not necessarily gore, it's just kind of gross. That's under the general nastiness. And
that's a general nastiness right there. Yeah,
that's some
actually a
general
really great
nastiness.
term. Like every time you look at him, it's just like, ugh,
It is
ugh.
just gross, you know? He's just
Yeah,
nasty
like
looking.
he points out
Um
this weird thing that's growing on him. He's like, "What's this? I don't even know what it is."
in the interviews after, yeah. Uh Yeah, and then there's a scene where some acidic puke is on businessman's hand
Business.
and leg. I forgot his name when I was writing this part. Acidic puke on businessman's hand and leg slash foot. Close up of limb melting.
Oh,
Um, then there's like a full ass transformation sequence
it's full on.
where he turns into the fly, and it's like, yeah, you see basically flesh breaking apart. I mean, I'm
So
making it
impressive.
sound pretty gross, but it is very obviously a um
It's
what's the
fake.
word?
It's a
Fake
puppet. It's a
puppet
yeah, it's animatronic.
animatronic thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it
So
doesn't move like fluid and natural like a
it's
person
not gonna
would.
look like it's CG basically. So
It's just very
that
impressive.
it's really impressive. So I think that scene, I was still grossed out watching it, but I was still fascinated by it. So it
Mhm.
was definitely and that was probably the most interesting part to watch. Um, and then we get to oh yeah, the fly transforms into a fly plus pod mixture. I think maybe at the start we should just put like full spoilers, like as
I
a
guess
warning.
yeah. Well, because
Because like
sometimes like
even going through the gore, it's like you have gore at every single plot point. Every
yeah,
like
no,
spoiler part is like gore. So
yeah, no, it's and yeah, because so much of it kind of happens around like the I'd say the second half of the movie. It really like yeah, almost every scene has an increasingly shocking thing that you see
yeah,
in the movie. So of course you would naturally kind of progress to the end of the movie with like what you're describing like was shocking gore to you because
yeah.
it just shows how well designed the movie is actually that It did exactly what
Yeah.
it was supposed to do. It ramps up.
It ramps up. It's very uncomfortable, the movie. And yeah, and the last point I have is just the fly getting, well, maybe I won't say this part, but someone damn it, I already ruined it. there's a there's a part where someone gets shot and then things explode.
I wonder
I
who
didn't
got
spoil
shot.
it.
No. It's Cheetah Davis. The fly picks up a gun and Cheetah.
Businessman.
Businessman.
Businessman gets shot
By
and he
Cheetah
explodes.
Davis. And then Gina
Yes.
Davis and the fly live happily ever
And the
after.
fly is sipping tea and watching.
I,
Yes.
I don't know,
Anyway,
like
so that's all the gore.
an ant documentary.
An ant documentary.
Did you know flies don't eat ants? No, it'd be like, I don't know what a fly would watch.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe like a documentary about poo.
I was just thinking of like instead of one of those fireplace channels, it's just like a big cow pie, and it's just like
Yeah.
sits there and just watches it.
Just the flies are like, oh, it looks so good.
Ooh, yeah, it's like the Food Network for them.
Yeah.
And now we're gonna make this delicious cow patty.
Anyways,
Yeah, I got a little.
now we can. This is just this is an uncomfortable movie, so there's gonna be a lot of uncomfortable laughter. So prepare yourselves
A
for
lot of giddy laughter from me as you get more and more uncomfortable.
yeah.
This was the most
Oh my
enjoyable
lord.
viewing experience yet for
I hope this podcast is gonna be listenable. So
yeah, hopefully we get under
continuing
the
on.
5 hour mark.
Right. But yeah, so that was the general gore summary and rating. So 3 out of 5 gory wieners. Now we can get into the detailed summary and put on your big person pants. Because I feel like I'm drunk or something. This is weird.
You're drunk on fear.
Right.
I think you are suffering from PTSD right now, and like you're
Yeah, I
actually
don't want to
forcing
talk
yourself to
about
relive
it.
it. That's like causing you to get more and more uncomfortable as you
Don't
think
want to
about
talk.
it.
Put on your big person pants
Oh,
because
this is a big person episode. Big person
because
pants.
the detailed summary is
Oh, I
two
can't wait.
pages long.
I can't wait for you to just
So
relive all of this. You're just gonna run
I'll
away by the end of the episode.
I'll go through it because you have a lot to talk about in the making of. So
Just
yeah, I'll
yeah,
go through it
let's
and
just dig into
you
this
can
big cow patty of
jump
an
in
episode.
jump in whenever you want. So it starts out right off the bat. We see Seth Brundle, who is Jeff Goldblum, meets Veronica Ronnie is her nickname, and that's Gina Davis. They meet at this Meet the Press event held by Bartok Science Industries, the company that is funding Seth's work. And Seth takes Ronnie back to his lab, asks her to document his work, which happens to be the invention of teleportation between two telepods. So you can tell there's a little bit of like a flirty atmosphere between them, and she agrees. She's wasn't really sure, like what the heck this guy is rambling on about until she sees him actually teleport an object successfully. Um,
Her
but
stocking.
yeah, her stocking. That's right. She like sexily places her leg up, and Jeff is just
Uh-huh.
like, ooh.
The love story begins.
I laughed at like Jeff's face when
Oh,
she put
Jeff
her leg
Goldblum
up
is so
there.
Jeff Goldbloomy through this whole
Oh,
beginning. Like
he's
any
he
normal
is
woman would not have gone with it.
and
Like he
it
takes
was
her
funny too
alone
because
to an abandoned
yeah,
warehouse, and the whole time he's talking so bizarre because he acts like he has this like, weird social disorder where he doesn't quite talk to people
it's
normally.
just Jeff being Jeff. But it's funny because I
It's
remember
great.
when we were watching this, I was like, you know what? I feel like if this was any other dude, I would not go with him. But because of the way that Jeff acts, you're just like, oh, he's a harmless guy. He's so sweet. Like I
He's
would just go with him.
childlike
Yeah, he's
wonder
got this
again.
innocence to him where it's like he's just he just seems like the nicest person.
I think
Where
Jeff
you go up
Goldblum,
and he shows you like a teleportation device. It's
right?
like,
And you're like, of course he
what?
did. Of course he has a
Yeah,
teleportation pod in his living room. It's like, I think
of
Jeff
course.
Goldblum is secretly Peter Pan grown up.
Hey, that's a good theory.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
going with now. We're gonna spread that throughout the internet.
Yeah, there you go. He's secretly Peter Pan. He's got that permanent state of wonder about him, no matter what he does, to the point where he has his own show on National Geographic called um, The World According to Jeff, I think is what it's called. Anyways,
That's
like
wonderful.
what other person would have
That
that
man needs
apart
more
from Jeff
platform.
Goldblum? He's amazing. So yeah, he successfully teleports her stalking, but when he goes to teleport a live object, it explodes in the
Ba-
other. Yeah, that poor monkey explodes,
Baboon just
gets
blows him
torn
up.
inside out. Um,
Very graphic.
and
Yeah.
so they're continuing to work together, and it's they kind of you see sort of their relationship develop over time. Um, and at one point, I remember Jeff. I was like, "What the hell is happening in this scene?" He has like some raw steak,
Oh
and
god, yeah.
He cuts it in half, and we're just like, "Who cuts their raw steak like that? That's not how you properly cook a steak.
That's
You need to cook it
insane.
whole and maintain the juices
Right?
and
Yeah, you need to contain the juices.
contain them." And so he actually puts part of the steak through the teleporter, and the other part he just cooks up normally, and he looks like he cooks it up terribly, by the
Oh,
way.
he's a terrible chef.
Terrible chef. And
It's well done
he
for
like
sure.
gives one half to Gina, and she's like, "What the hell is this? This tastes terrible." And
Mm.
he's like, "Okay, we'll try this one." And it's like looked like it was breakfast time too. It's like
Yeah, yeah, it's like
cooking a
his first thing
steak
in the
first
day.
thing in the morning. And she's like, "I don't know. This one just tastes like a steak, I guess." And it's like that's probably what I would say too. It doesn't look like a good steak, but probably tastes like a steak. And so they figure out through this experiment that the pod is actually just trying to create its interpretation of living flesh and not actually copying um, the genetic material over exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so this is kind of glossed over in the movie, but basically Jeff just or Seth fixes it. He just codes something into the computer that teaches it to read flesh and copy it exactly. And we're like, as the audience, okay, sure, science,
Yeah,
I
just
guess.
figure with the computer, put some more wires into it, and boom. It
Yeah.
understands how to reorganize human cells perfectly. It's
Yeah,
fine.
that's super
It's good.
easy because Seth is like an ultra genius, so
Yeah,
it just makes
very
sense.
eccentric.
Yes. And yeah, so after he's reprogrammed the machine, he puts the super fluffy baboon
Oh,
into
he's so
one part.
cute.
What is his name again?
Well,
From the
he's
from
from
the Red
another
Letter
movie where
Medium?
he's called Shockma, but
Chakra.
the real name of the baboon is Typhoon.
Oh, it's
That's his
Typhoon,
name.
and he's
Typhoon.
so fluffy. He's the cutest baboon. Anyway, so they put this baboon. He kind of stole the show for a second
Oh,
there.
he's adorable.
Um, he put the baboon
He's like
through,
Jeff
and
Goldblum, one of Jeff Goldblum's main co-stars in the movie. He's in a good chunk of it.
yeah, he is. He's kind of just casually there for a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. 'Cause
Um,
he's talking to him in the chair, and
yeah,
when Jeff
that's
Goldblum in the
right.
next scene starts getting drunk, and the
That's
baboon's
right.
just like hanging out in the chair.
So cute. So yeah, that leads me to the next point. It's like so the baboon is successfully transported. Um, but Gina Davis wasn't there to celebrate with him. She actually was heading to the office. Um,
Mm,
but to Seth, he I guess we need a little bit of a backstory. So Gina's editor happens to also be her ex, and it's very clear that he still wants a relationship with her, but she doesn't. And so she actually went to the office to confront the editor,
he's
whose
like borderline
name,
sexually harassing her because
yeah,
she's also
like
his
he's
her
greasy.
employee.
At the start of the movie, you do not like this guy. His name is Stathis Borons. Like, what the hell?
Status.
Stathis. No wonder I didn't remember his
What a
name in
name
the
is that?
intro. I'm just gonna call him businessman because he
Yeah,
dresses like a
yeah.
businessman throughout the
He's
whole movie.
businessman. Guy
He's
with beard.
businessman. So she goes to the office to confront businessman about a veiled threat he made uh, about publishing her pod story without her consent because she's been working on this super in-depth story with Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
Seth. I don't think I could ever call him Seth,
He's
but
Jeff Goldblum.
he's just Jeff Goldblum. Um, so they've been working on this super in-depth story, and understandably, it's a pretty breakthrough piece. So she's going to confront him about this, but Jeff is just kind of he doesn't understand all of the ins and outs of like what their relationship is, so he just assumes that she's going back to rekindle
Yeah. She stood
their
him up and
relationship. And so he gets drunk. Jeff gets super wasted and drunk, and
with his
he ends
baboon.
up with his baboon that's chilling there, and he's like talking drunkenly to this baboon. It's like, who does she think she is?
I would have
And
loved to have been on set for that part, just watching
because
Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff is actually drinking, like he's probably
Oh,
actually drunk
there's
there.
probably hours of footage of him just rambling to a baboon sitting in
Oh
a
yeah.
chair. Just let
So
him go.
out of jealousy and despair, Jeff gets drunk and teleports himself through the pods, unaware that a fly was sharing the pod with him. Ooh. So
Oh,
he comes
that's
out seemingly fine on the other side,
almost
but we as
fine.
the audience know that this is just the beginning.
He gets his Spider-Man Tobey Maguire transformation, and he gets shiny abs when he comes out.
That's right.
He's just all of
Yeah,
a
he
sudden
does.
buffer. He's,
He's just suddenly like slightly more buff.
that's hilarious.
Um, and yeah, so we see that happen, and basically Seth and Ronnie reconcile quickly after this, and she explains what happened, and yeah, Jeff feels a little bit stupid, but admits to
Naturally.
Ronnie that he actually did go through, and he's fine. And
Mhm.
strangely enough, he starts acting a little bit different, and we see like a little bit of a sequence where um well, not quite the sequence yet, but there's one shot we were talking about earlier where Jeff is in uh the cafe, and it's like showing that he's having more sugar cravings, and
So much
um
sugar.
he's like pouring like a sugar dish basically into his coffee, like as if nothing is wrong. And
He's just
Ronnie's like,
going, he's rambling
what?
the whole time. He's
He's
just.
rambling. He's rambling about how much better he feels, like it basically purified his body,
Oh,
and
yeah,
he feels
yeah.
like everybody should be doing this, and he's trying to convince Gina Davis to do this, and she's like, I don't know, like give it some time. And there's like a really funny scene where it's like completely improv where he's just sitting there, and you can see there's a cannoli on the table, and he's like, you know what, matter of fact, I think I'm gonna get a cannoli. Waiter, one here for me, please. And he keeps talking, and it's like 5 seconds later, and he's like, waiter, where the fuck are you? Jesus Christ. He's clearly just very hyperactive and
It's wonderful, yeah.
a little bit insane, and he's very Jeff Goldblum doing the like,
And David Cronenberg would just let him
twitchy.
go too. It was so
It's
wonderful.
amazing.
He would just
Did so
yeah.
well.
Jeff Goldblum would just plan this the night before, and then he would just like add on a whole section to every scene where he has like a monologue, and it's just all those scenes are so much extended, which is hilarious to see. It just makes the
Yeah.
movie so great.
Jeff Goldblum's got a Jeff Goldblum. So good.
He's
But
gotta
yeah, so
bloom. You gotta let him
Jeff
bloom.
Jeff's got a Jeff. Yeah,
They
I
call
can't
it
put
blooming.
that together.
It's like
Jeff Goldblum's got a bloom.
you should wear that on a
Anyways,
shirt.
this,
I could see
it's a little
Jeff Goldblum wearing
the
that
little
shirt.
flower of
With his
him,
face in it. It's just
but
like
it's
the
like the
sun from
fly face. Jeff Goldblum's got a bloom.
all
This
the
is yeah.
mandibles.
Weird. If we ever make merch, hey,
Fly flower.
Jeff
That's
Goldblum's got a
Jeff
bloom.
Goldblum's got a bloom. It's just a fly head bursting out the middle of
Hey,
a flower.
I would wear it.
I would
Wear it.
totally wear that shirt. Are you wearing a Brundlefly flower shirt that says Jeff Goldblum's got a bloom? Oh, the flower petals, if you want to make it really disgusting, could be Jeff Goldblum's human body unfolded, and then Brundlefly comes out of it. It's
Oh, that
It's
sounds
so gross.
disgusting. No, we need to make it. We need to make it cute.
Yeah, maybe that's too far. I don't think people would want to wear that.
I would no longer wear that.
That'd be so. I would love to see someone wearing that'd be so disgusting.
Oh my
I could see the
god.
flower one being a lot more popular.
Yeah, okay. Noted for our
Yeah,
future merch when we have more than 5 listeners.
one day, someone you'll see
Day.
somebody walking down the street. Jeff Goldblum's
Jeff
got a blue
Goldblum's
shirt.
got a blue.
That's when we know we've made it.
I might just make it for myself.
Oh my
Anyways,
gosh. Yes, you should. This is how you spread word of mouth. Like, where'd you get that shirt? And why do you have
yeah,
that shirt? And then you just lead in.
leading it into the podcast.
Yeah.
Perfect.
You're like walking advertisement for us. It'd be great.
Amazing. Yeah. So
You'll tell all the friends.
basically, yeah.
And everyone will be wearing Jeff Goldblum's Got a Bloom t-shirts.
I don't know why it's so funny.
It's
But yeah,
just accompanied with the photo of Jeff Goldblum's face coming out of or the Brundlefly coming out of a flower. It's wonderful
okay.
juxtaposition. Okay, well, we've got enough of a side tangent about our Jeff Goldblum merchandise.
That isn't in existence yet.
No,
Whew,
our
okay.
fictional
Back
Jeff
to
Goldblum
the
merchandise.
back to the summary. So So he clearly has a lot of sugar cravings, but he also has increased strength, agility, stamina, and sex drive, which he attributes to the teleportation purifying his body. We do see, like, almost immediately the next morning, he's like this random gymnast that's just spinning around all over his very industrial apartment ceiling that just has all these poles everywhere. And he's
Yes,
just
perfect.
spinning around it. He's holding on and he's just spinning around this pole.
Yeah.
And Gene is like, wow, well, that's cool. I don't see
Oh my
anything wrong with this at all. It's super hot. He's got abs.
Look at those abs. Those abs are built on flies.
Like, I can definitely see why Jeff won. I mean, not to be rude. Like, Gina Davis is an amazing actress. But I could definitely see why Jeff won the Oscar and not Gina.
Did they both get
Because
nominated for The Fly?
yeah, they
Oh, that's
did.
great.
Jeff won.
Oh crap!
I
I
think
didn't know that.
I think it was Oscars. Maybe it was a different award, but
The fact that they
yeah.
won
Anyways,
anything is
he
great.
won like best actor, and she was nominated for best actress, but she lost to it. And I think a big part of why is just because her character is a little bit more of a damsel in
She
distress
doesn't
character.
have
It's
too
not
much to do. It's all
not
watching
as
Jeff
much.
Goldblum. He is the
It's
star.
not. It's not very. There's not a lot of depth to her character, I guess. Like, there is a little bit, but it's obviously with Jeff there's more because he has a lot more like internal
Yeah,
struggle later
yeah, and
on in the
over the
movie.
course of the movie, she kind of, she is more of a damsel. Like she does have a continuing storyline throughout the
Yeah.
movie, but it's definitely Jeff Goldblum's on the screen. You're
It's
watching
more
Jeff
like
Goldblum.
she's a supporting character even though she is a co-star. At a certain point she's really just yeah, everyone's a
You're just watching.
supporting character to Jeff
You're
in
just
this
watching
movie.
Jeff be Jeff. Like, oh god.
Everyone's a supporting character to Jeff and the effects animators
Yes,
and
yes.
character designers.
Yeah, you're just so amazed by what he looks like, and you're just kind of waiting to see what disgusting form he's gonna take next.
Yeah, which we'll get into later. It's very impressive how they were able to consistently um transform him without any continuity issues because they had to build a new fly for each segment and it had to all make sense within the story and it all had to lead up to the same point. So
yeah, they said between every shot, once he had like almost full prosthetics on, they had to touch him up with every shot because the makeup took so long to put on that by the time they got to the end of the makeup process, the beginning was already falling off. So they're like, it was just constantly like every scene, they're like, "Oh, Jeff, hey," like making sure they don't show any of the rubber bits showing because there's so much that could make it look stupid. Because
there's so much. Yeah, they did a very good job of, and I felt disgusted the whole time. So good job.
So effective. See, you didn't get taken out. You're just like, wow, this is really gross.
This is disgusting, and it's like 30 years later. So congratulations.
It's goop
It's
ages
nasty.
like a fine
Yeah,
wine.
practical effects. It ages well as
Yeah.
opposed to CG. It does not age well.
Ooh. Oh.
Um, so yeah, that is all what's happening at this point in the movie, and Ronnie is starting to notice as well now. And you see, there's a point where they were having sex, and Jeff
Oh
he
yeah,
gets
the
he
hairs.
like lies down on
Like
some
microchip.
computer microchip
Yeah.
something. It looked like a chunk out of a motherboard that was just like chilling out on his hide a bed.
Yeah, he
He's
doesn't
got a
even
hide
have
a
a
bed.
real bed. He just has a stupid hide a bed. Like,
And I feel like I've seen that same hide a bed in my grandparents' place from when I was a child. Like
oh
it's
yeah,
that hide a bed.
they definitely bought that at like some grandma's like garage sale. It's like, yep, this is what Jeff Goldblum sleeps in.
And it's believable. I could picture young Jeff Goldblum just having a hide a bed.
My back hurt just thinking about sleeping on that bar that's always runs down the
I
middle of it.
know.
It's like the
But
worst
yeah.
sleep.
So he at that point he lies down and he gets a kind of a gash on his back, which just made me laugh because Gina like she sees it and she's like, "Oh, that sucks." She like pulls it out and then they just
Ooh,
go back to having sex. I was like,
it was like clean it or something.
that's kind of gross, but yeah, it looked like a pretty bad
little,
wound.
little
That's
disinfectant, maybe.
fine.
Like you don't know how much dirt's on
Would
that
have
disgusting microchip that was in your bed. That you also
get
live
a
in a disgusting warehouse.
yeah, get a little band-aid
Yeah,
and some just clean it.
little
So
polysporin.
yeah, a little polysporin or just something, soap and water.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, so that happened, and later on in the movie, now after he's gone through and he, with the fly, he is now starting to get these super coarse hairs growing
Ugh.
out of it, and you can see like Gina's like she can feel them, and they like
They're so
well, they're like
gross looking. They look so
they
hard. Something
they
about how they're
remind
designed.
I feel like someone just took the strings off of a ukulele and put them in there because it
Yeah.
has the same texture. It's like
Oh,
black ukulele strings that
yeah.
are
No,
just like
I
sticking
played
out.
the ukulele as a child. I know exactly
I
what you're
think
talking
many
about.
people, yeah, it's a very common instrument, so I feel like,
Yes.
yeah, it's that same texture like that.
Totally.
Yeah, so
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
I can
really
tell that
gross.
every time I see that. I'm like, oh, it's like a ukulele. It just,
It's like
it's, it just plays back. I'm like, ooh, cool island tunes coming from Jeff Goldblum's back.
yes, cool island too.
Yeah.
There's another shirt.
Cool Island tunes, and it's just a close-up picture of his back, and someone's finger just. Oh,
Oh, that's amazing. I want
yeah.
that also as a shirt. Cool island tunes.
Cool
So
Island
then
tunes. Jeff
so
Goldblum.
she's Ronnie's starting to notice this and so she tries to bring it up to Jeff and
He's not
but
having it.
he becomes very aggressive when he's confronted and basically takes off and he runs. I don't know. He shows up at a bar somehow.
Yeah.
It
Well,
looked like as in like in the middle of nowhere.
yeah, yeah. He's like, well, he lives in the middle of nowhere, so that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
and he does. He starts to kind of like throughout the movie. It's kind of like also like a drug addiction how he acts. Like he's first has like the
Yeah.
highs at the beginning when he first does it, and he thinks it's amazing, and then slowly he gets obsessed with it,
Yeah.
and then he gets obsessed with the idea of using it and having other people use it, and it really drives his decisions, and he starts to kind of succumb to his addiction of how
Yeah.
he thinks it makes him better, and he doesn't want anyone to point out a negative about it, and he becomes very defensive when he does, just
Yeah.
like a drug addict, because they don't want to
That's a
think
good point.
about the damage that they're doing. They just want to
Yeah. 'Cause
do
they
drugs.
in their mind, it's like they know they've had this amazing experience with it. It was such an amazing high, so they're just
Yeah.
trying to remember that part and just get back to that point.
Hmm.
Um, but he's so far gone now that he doesn't realize how far he's falling. And
Hmm.
at one point, I really liked from like the little bits and pieces I saw from the behind the scenes was when Gina Davis was saying how David Cronenberg was explaining to her how to sort of see this process as more like when somebody is developing cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
they're becoming really sick, and they're slowly becoming a person that they no longer are. So
Yeah.
it's almost like um, Jeff is just he's becoming this super sick version of himself that he can't
Ugh.
fully accept, and but she's watching this happen to him, and so she's
Yeah.
trying to deal with the loss of the person she fell in love with but still cares about who
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
was. So
Having being helpless and having to watch a
yeah,
loved one like deteriorate, like that's terrible for anybody
that's
to have to go
basically
through.
yeah.
So it's yeah.
So that I thought that perspective was a really good way to think about it, is because it is very cancerous, the fly growing
Oh, he's so
in him basically.
so
um
bubbly.
it's super lumpy.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, at this point he just has sores on his face. He's not super disfigured yet. He looks gross. He does look like a
He's
very horrible drug addict is what
yeah,
he looks like
yeah,
right
he looks
now.
like crazy strung out on heroin or something. Like he's just
Super
like
strung out, and like he's got tons of sores on his face and weird hairs sticking out all
yeah.
over the place. And so he goes to this bar, and this is the part I couldn't watch. um so he goes there, and I feel like he was hitting on some woman at the beginning, but he gets sucked into this arm wrestling match,
Yeah.
and he's so strong at this point he just basically breaks his opponent's arm, compound fracture. And he takes off with this lady named Tawny, I believe.
Oh wow, I
And
didn't know she had a name.
it
Oh,
said it in the Wikipedia, and I
okay,
think
it's
I remembered it because it was random.
Tawny, that memorable character. That's
Yes.
there's a fun little story about the guy whose arm gets broken. He's actually a Canadian heavyweight boxer, and Jeff Goldblum's
Yep.
a huge boxing fan, and he was super excited to meet him. There's a little interview where Jeff Goldblum talked about how giddy he was to be
Aw,
around him.
that's cute.
It's hilarious.
That's funny. So yeah, he that's cool. He got to meet a minor hero in his life.
Right,
And
Canadian heavyweight boxing champion. Who's a
hell
fan
yeah.
of that? It's
It's
amazing.
so funny.
It's great.
Makes me happy to be Canadian.
Right?
Jeff Goldblum must love Canadians.
Oh yeah.
Um, um,
It was filmed in
yeah.
Canada as well because David Cronenberg refused to
Oh yeah,
film
that's
anywhere
right. Because
else.
he's a very yeah. He
Patriotic and
likes
kind of loyal
yeah.
guy.
Patriotic is the right word. Sorry, there's a dog that's distracting me right
Demands attention.
now.
Oh.
You need some pets. Yeah.
Yes.
So so Jeff takes back Tawny to his weird
Swinging
giant
pad. It's all
yeah
his apart
industrial apartment thing.
and it gets progressively grungier throughout the movie too as
Yeah,
he
it
like
gets pretty gross, and he himself was looking pretty nasty at this point, and they have sex, and then
oh I
Gina
can't
Davis walks in, and she's yeah. At
well
this point, I feel like their relationship is basically done, like romantically, and
yeah,
she's
she's
just kind of
concerned. She's
she's more
scared for
concerned.
him, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's like, well, and Jeff Goldblum's attempting to drag this half-naked woman into one of the teleporting
that's
pods
right.
as she
Yes,
arrives, and he's like, "There's nothing to be afraid of," and she and David's like, "There is a lot to be afraid of."
yes. Be afraid.
Be
Be
very
very
afraid.
afraid. Um,
And
yeah.
he
So
pieces it.
luckily, yeah, she intervenes. Luckily, um,
She saves
and
it. Poor lady.
yeah, and this is what happens next. Is kind of like the next gross scene of his fingernails. So
Oh yeah.
after this part, I think this is kind of when we start to see more of um, his deterioration really starts to pick up. So his
This is where
skin is getting really gross.
the goop
Yeah,
begins.
you see more hairs on his face, and um, his fingers are clearly getting a little weird, like they're lumpy. And then There's goop. You were saying like on the hand wrestling scene,
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
could
When
even see goop on his hands and fingers.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
the first hint of the slime. Yeah, when he grabs a guy's hand, some goop kind of squeezes out between their hands.
Ugh, nasty. So then, yeah, this part he's basically taking his nails off, just like
Just
peeling them off as if they're like just little like stickers, like not stickers, but
it's pretty
like
much like he doesn't seem to
like the
hurt
stick on
him.
nails. Like if they're
Yeah,
like
fake
nasty,
nails,
goopy stick on nails, that was like he was just peeling them off like that.
but they're
Ugh.
his nails.
But they're his nails. And it's really goopy, and then he puts them in his medicine cabinet.
In his museum of
Which
Brundlefly.
later becomes more and more disgusting, but
Oh.
this is kind of like the first bit. Um,
And also, he pops the end of his finger like a pimple, which is very disgusting.
yeah,
Unless
that's
you're one of those
right.
freaks that likes pimple popping
I might have
videos.
missed that part because I was watching it, but I kind of like was twitching in and out.
It's blacking in and out of consciousness. Your brain's trying to save yourself.
I
It's,
was watching it. I was forcing myself to watch it because I was like, no, you have to watch it. It's probably not as bad as you think it is. And it was
it's worse.
watchable, but it was like I was twitching in and out. I was twitching in and
It's,
out watching it. That's why
that's
it
pretty goofy. It's just like
That's why
this.
I got .5 of a mark off because I watched most of it. I
Yeah,
watched like
yeah, yeah.
the most parts of it.
Your brain could fill in the rest of the horror that you missed out on. You remember there's
um,
a lot of slime and disgusting body parts falling off.
yeah. So it took up until this point to convince to convince Jeff that there's something wrong with him. It's like, oh, okay. I mean, the other things weren't that big of a deal, but I guess if my fingernails are falling out, okay, sure. So
Right.
he goes to check the computer, and he investigates the computer's records, and he discovers that there were two life forms. So he was going through it, and he was like checking, what happened. And oh my god, sorry, the dog's under my desk now.
He's gotten under the desk. He's
He's
tearing
gone
out
rogue.
wires.
He's a huge dog. How did he fit under there?
I
um
wouldn't expect him to just pop out
I
under
know.
there. It's like huskies aren't tiny.
So the computer says that there were two life forms in the pods, and he was like, oh shit. um and he kind of does more investigative work, and he discovers that it confused the two life forms, fusing them together at the molecular genetic level, which
Yeah.
means he is basically half fly. So he's fused completely with another life form. Um, that basically it said Brundle absorbed fly, I think is
Yeah,
what it said.
Brundle is fly, fly is
Brundle,
Brundle,
yeah,
and he comes to real. That's when he like kind of starts to mentally snap and starts to go like kooky and things like, well, what am I? Am I a fly or am I a man? Like,
yeah,
it's like he kind of flips flops back and forth throughout the movie on which one he thinks he is, and the fly wants its
yeah.
piece of the pie.
It sure does. So that's kind of what happens after this is a few weeks later, Ronnie reconnects with Jeff, and she has
Oh,
now seen
so
how much
goopy.
further he's deteriorated. He's lost human features, and he's gained insect features. He's starting to
His
vomit
shirt.
digestive enzymes before consuming food, and can cling to walls and the ceiling. Mentally, he is becoming much more primitive, losing control of his insect impulses. Oh wait, no, losing control to his more insect impulses.
Mhm. He's got those like
Yes.
canes to walk with, and
Yeah, he's
like,
got Kate. He's like this. It's weird because he moves around like a very weak old man, but then he can like jump on the wall and like climb
yeah,
around.
yeah, yeah.
So
He
it's like
goes.
his human abilities are failing, but the fly ones are gaining traction.
That's a good point and a good way to look at it. Is that yeah he's no longer kind of having the ability to move like a normal person, but he now is far more natural at moving like a fly than
Yes,
walking like a
yeah.
man, and he's so goopy. Like he has like this plaid shirt on, and it's just
Goopy.
the goop is secreting out of the shirt. It's
Yeah.
just like I can't imagine how much slime Jeff Goldblum must have been covered in for that scene. Apparently, that scene
Yeah.
freaked audience members out when Gina Davis just chooses to hug him, even though he's just like covered in slime. Because apparently, the side that she chose to hug him on was the side where the ear just fell off, so people were freaked
Oh,
out.
right. Yeah, there's you yeah, you do see before she comes, that's right. So he, like, takes his ear falls off and he takes it off, and that's when you see more stuff in the medicine cabinet.
Oh, and again, yeah, the way he reacts to it is so Jeff Goldblum, and that he's not horrified at all. He's just like,
No.
"Oh, what do you know? It's on my ear."
I
It's,
feel like at this point, it's just kind of like, God, it's like he's just accepted it because
y-
his brain is also partially fused with the fly. So it's sort of like you can understand how the fly part of his brain is wanting this to happen. He wants
yeah,
to take over. And then
yeah.
sometimes the human portion takes over a little more and he becomes a little more distressed,
Oh,
which
that's
you see a
actually
little
yeah,
later.
yeah. That's probably also a good way to look at it. Is that mentally, yeah, when he's acting more crippled, he's also his human side of his brain is actually working more, and then when he's comfortable again, it's probably the fly side of him like
Yeah,
accepting and kind of taking more control. Yeah, I never thought of that. That's a good point.
possible. It's just an interpretation, but who
Yeah,
knows?
it's
And yeah,
good
so
enough for me.
after yeah. Yeah, so after this, you see that Seth has installed a fusion program into the telepod computer, showing that he is planning to dilute his fly genes with human DNA.
Yeah,
So
that's right. The
yeah,
computer
that's
tells
his
him.
plan.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
computer tells him it's like the only way to attempt to become a normal person again is to just add more people to you, which sounds like a horrible idea.
Just add more human. It's like make trying to make your drink more watery is just by adding water. It's like
Yeah,
I guess you could do that. It's still gonna taste like a little bit of what it was before, though.
yeah. It's never
Unless
gonna go
you
back.
add like a gallon to like
You,
a one drop, and at that point, that would be like a million humans, and you'd be like a really fucked up thing.
you just become the thing essentially. This horrible
Yeah, you would.
amalgamation of just
Um,
body parts. Yeah, that's his master plan,
yeah,
though.
that's his
That's
master plan.
that's.
And then we see that Ronnie is pretty triggered by this, and she's not
Yeah,
triggered, but she's disgusted and
yeah, a little disturbed.
horrified, disturbed of what has happened, and it causes her. So I guess a little bit before I get too ahead of myself, she discovers she's pregnant, and that
Oh
gives her this horrible nightmare of her
god.
giving birth to a ginormous maggot,
Oh, it's so
which the
gross.
delivery nurse or doctor
Yeah,
practitioner happens to be David Cronenberg.
yeah. Little director
Cool little
cameo.
tidbit.
Deliver.
Yeah.
He's the one that holds up the disgusting
I'm
larva baby.
sure I'm sure he wanted to hold that
He
thing up
must have
because
been
it's
so
him.
excited because he probably got to operate it. He was probably like, "Oh, let me do it. I want to operate the larva worm thing." He's like, there's a
Of
behind the
course.
scenes where he's critiquing the speed of it, and he's like, "Oh, it needs to go faster. It's got to wriggle quicker."
Yeah.
It's
Oh, it's
great
so
listening to
gross.
someone seriously discuss a weird human fly larva coming out of a person. Like this is a serious conversation to have.
Nasty. So yeah, at this
It's
point of
gross.
the movie, things start to get a lot more fast paced because we're now, I guess, 3/4 of the way done the movie at this point, and then
Yeah,
this last bit just goes by super fast. So,
ramps up.
um,
Oh boy.
Gina Davis, she's talking to her ex businessman,
Business.
to her ex,
Ex-business.
comma the
Business.
businessman. um,
Yeah.
and has explained everything that's happened and has basically said she's pregnant, she needs an emergency abortion,
Yeah.
and this is all while this discussion happened before she had actually gone um
Jeff.
to visit Jeff Goldblum, I believe, because I remember Gina was um, actually going to confront him and sort of tell him about the baby, but she gets too disgusted by his
Yeah, freaked out.
new the new developments of his transformation, and she ends up leaving and is horrified, and she's in tears, goes out to the car where businessman is. He drove her there, and basically just says, I can't do this, I need an abortion immediately.
Yeah.
And that is how Jeff overhears that conversation happening. So when she's in the abortion room, you see this this point at this
It's
point Jeff is in
amazing.
like a full ass bodysuit, and he
Oh.
does like a starfish pose through this glass
Ah!
wall.
It's
which
amazing. So funny
and
watching.
and this is now when Gina Davis is like full damsel in distress, and he
Yeah.
takes her
Oh.
and jumps away. He's trying to convince her to keep the baby because it's all of him, all of his humanity that there is left, and she
Yeah.
can't do it. So he captures her, take he takes her back to the lab,
Yeah.
which is his apartment, in case
Yeah.
I'm
All
confusing
in one.
anyone.
Yeah.
But so yeah, captures her, and then businessman is like, I'm gonna save the day, and he
I'm gonna do.
goes there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna save the day,
The
and he shows
businessman.
up, and he's absolutely horrified by
He immediately
Jeff
regrets his
Goldblum.
decision.
And it's funny because this is the part where Jeff pukes on businessman's hand and foot, but it's like one of those scenes in a horror movie where it's like he could have moved away.
Yeah. It's just.
Like businessman could have moved his hand out of the way and like ran away, but
Yeah.
he was standing there, and that goop got on there and it like melted his
That's
hand all
true.
down.
Yeah. He's not. Is Jeff Goldblum?
I
Is he
don't
grabbing
remember.
his hand? Yeah. I don't
I
remember.
think he was trying to grab it. I can't remember. But it felt like he could have moved away, but it
He
was
had a
like
moment. If he didn't
there
just.
must have been a reason why he couldn't move, but it just felt a little bit it was just a little bit funny that it was
Yeah. Yeah.
happening. And then he
Just.
did it to his foot as well, so now he's completely disabled, and he was about to do it to his head when Gina is just like, "No, don't. It's
Don't
my
kill businessman.
businessman."
It's
So
my businessman.
it's my businessman, not your businessman. And so and so Jeff is like reluctantly um
Doesn't barf on his head.
stops, reluctantly holds in his barf, and
Who's about to puke on him?
um yeah, and then basically Jeff is planning to fuse himself and Gina and her unborn child to create the ultimate family, as Jeff puts
Oh,
it,
that's
into
right.
one person, which is so gross.
So
Um,
messed up.
and so he traps Ronnie into the first telepod, and he puts himself on the other after he begins the teleportation countdown sequence. Um, and Stathis, the businessman, is able to fumble for his shotgun, and he is able to actually shoot the cable near Ronnie's pod with his uninjured hand, severing its
Yeah.
connection to the computer. And yeah, Seth, who is now almost completely the fly, breaks out amidst this. Actually,
I think he
I
is he.
think I
I
did.
think.
I missed a few sequences where he's like transforming into the
Yeah, yeah, because I
fly.
think he's full on.
Uh,
He's full on fly guy.
he
I
is
think
full on
when
fly
he
at this
bursts
point.
out. Yeah.
Right, there is a part because I'm just trying to get through the plot of it, but
Yeah.
there is
It's a lot of goop.
a part where he's shoving Gina Davis into the pod, Gina basically
Oh
yanks on
yeah.
his jaw, and the
Rips.
jaw is what causes his transformation. Like it pulled off one part of his face, and so the rest of like the fly is like it transforms out, and it's
Bursting out of
super
him.
nasty, and it's actually a really impressive sequence.
It's like
But
he's
yeah, he
birthing himself almost. It's very
yeah,
disgusting.
he is. So after this happens, he's able to push Gina into the pod, and then he gets himself into the pod. And this countdown is happening. Businessman shoots the wire, and it severs her connection to the pod. So then, um, the fly tries to get out, and stop the sequence or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's too late, and the teleportation sequence has begun as he's getting out of the pod, and so the computer actually identifies him and the pod as the two objects, as opposed to him and Gina as the two
Yes.
objects, and so it fuses them together as fly and pod. And so when they open up the third pod, um, basically it's Jeff Goldblum as the fly, like mixed together with this
Bits and
computery pod bits that are sticking out of him, and it's super sad and depressing because he's just like basically asking Gina to kill him. Like, she has the shotgun
yeah,
ready to
he just
shoot,
like holds it
and
up to
he
his
holds it up
head
to his head, and she reluctantly does shoot him. But
in a terrific head
yeah,
explosion.
in a terrific head explosion, and then she falls to the floor in tears, and that's basically the ending. Yay, the
Yay!
fly.
The fly. That's the
So
movie.
that is that the whole summary. And now after an hour we can get into like the making of the all the gory delights.
all the gore. Yeah, it's yeah. Well, that is a wonderful synopsis of that whole movie. That is yeah, that's it's a
It
lot to
was in depth.
process.
See,
It's
it's just a very there's a lot going on. It feels like you have to say every single part of it for everything to work together, because there's just so many moving parts. It feels like it's
yeah.
also
Well,
it's a simple story, but it has a lot going on.
yeah, like the details are in the movie are there's a lot, yeah, happening all the time, and it moves really well. But yeah, if you just like have a brief description, it's like, yeah, it's about a guy accidentally turning himself into a fly, and that's essentially the movie. But the way it's told is so well done that it's yeah,
Yeah, no,
it's
exactly.
and it's just so memorable. It really sticks with you because every time you see Jeff Goldblum again, he is in a different, more gross, progressive stage of his fly transformation. Just they do a really
Yeah,
good job of ramping up what he looks like, and
they
they
do.
did an amazing job. And the guy who made it was Chris Wallace, one of the two.
Mm.
He's actually he did Gremlins before this, and then he came
Oh,
on
cool.
to do The Fly. And actually, while they were right before they began, he got a call from Steven Spielberg while he was doing pre-production on The Fly, and Steven Spielberg like called him into his office. He's like, "Hey, we want you to make Gremlins 2." And he's like, "Do you want to make that?" So he said he had to decide. He's like, "Well, do I want to do The Fly or do I want to do Gremlins 2?" And he's like, The Fly will be a lot harder, but I think I'll enjoy it a lot more. So he decided to
Nice.
go with The Fly, even though he knew it would be a way more difficult job, because they essentially sat him down, and the producer, he told him, he's like, "All right, Chris, I know this is a movie that would take 6 months to do, but you only have 3 months. Can you make it work?"
Oh,
And he's like, "Well, it's almost impossible, but yeah, I guess so." And
oh my
so he
god.
just agreed to it. He's like, "Yep, 3 months." So they were just like working like 20-hour days and just
Holy
constantly
shit.
just there. Just it's like we're building stuff. It's like we need to make as much of this stuff as possible. So there's a shitload of like actual prosthetics and stuff left over because he took his entire studio and just they all focused on The Fly, nothing else, and they just
Yeah.
tried to pump out as much of the different
Wow.
makeup and
I hope
effects.
he
And
was paid well.
oh, it was crazy. I don't know how well those guys get paid, but they clearly love their job. Like they
It
yeah,
seems like a fun job. Just
yeah,
20 hours. I really wish that the movie industry would accept that human beings need more time to create things.
yeah, just extend the whole thing.
Just extend it. If it's impossible to do it in 3 months, give them more time.
It's crazy. It's like
Anyways.
this horrible like slave driving mentality, but it does force people to just think very creatively and
It's
outside of
true.
the
That's
box,
true.
and it's also probably abuse, but
A
it
little
certainly made a
bit.
disgusting masterpiece, if nothing else.
Yep.
Yeah, so they built all this stuff, and they have the 7 stages of all of his transformation, and like you described most of them already. Like the
Mhm.
stage 1 and 2 is like when he's just kind of getting his rashy face going on, and he's still very
Yeah.
much just Jeff Goldblum, and he's his hair's kind of starting to get fly-y, and then stage three and four, they're kind of, this is when he starts to squirt goop out of his fingers and his nails are falling
Ew.
off, and he's got like really big lips, and his I think this is when his face starts to kind of get a little weird and lumpy looking, and bald spots, and he's got like starting to get gross teeth that are falling out, and he starts to vomit on his food at this point. This is the barfing stage, and
Lovely.
climbing on walls stage,
Woo.
which that in of itself was a fun process to actually create that effect of him crawling on the walls, because they built an entire fake stage of his kitchen, and they built it inside of a giant metal drum that's like meant for like
Oh,
sewer systems. It's a
yeah.
24-foot wide big piece of metal steel essentially, and they built a square room inside of it that looked exactly like the warehouse room, and they got all the props and they glued everything to everything, and they could actually rotate the whole drum and spin it so that all the walls were moving, but they had the camera on like this system where it would always stay at the same angle even as it was spinning.
Mhm.
And so the cameraman sat in this little seat, and the whole thing spun, and he would spin with it, but he would always stay straight, essentially. and
Oh,
uh,
wow.
and Jeff Goldblum eventually, all he did is just like walk in place, because the whole room was moving around him, so it looked like he was
Yeah.
walking down the wall and onto the floor, but he's actually just standing in one spot essentially, and that's
Oh,
why
that's
he hops.
cool.
That's why he hops from the wall to the floor, because he's actually hopping to make sure he can get the jump in time, because the thing continuously spins, and he just has to
Oh,
kind of
wow.
move with it. So
Huh.
people love that thing. So there's tons of video footage of just like every actor and even David Cronenberg himself, all running on it. They're just like David
That's so
Cronenberg.
cool.
David Cronenberg did one of the first tests. He wore this like little Flight of the Bumblebee suit and was like running around inside. He had like these big green wings and like little antlers on. It's just like,
That's really funny.
yeah, it was amazing watching these like, yeah, so they all love that. The Jeff Goldblum there was all these interviews where how excited he was to be in the metal drum. And he just got to like run around inside of it. And
Oh.
so that's then we get on to stage 5, where he becomes very gross, he's in a full rubber plastic suit that is just fully lumpy. He's got all of this like squishy bits to him, and this was kind of interesting because there was like another addition to the suit that didn't quite make it to the final movie, because it horrified and disgusted people so much that they couldn't handle watching it, and they
Glad
yeah.
glad they took it out.
It's like just described, and it's wonderful. Everyone should check out this documentary. Like the what is it? Fear of the
Fear
fear
of
of the
flesh.
fear of the flesh. Yeah, which is a
I
wonderful
couldn't
title.
find it anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. If you buy the
You have to
Blu-ray,
you have to buy the Blu-ray, yeah.
yeah, but it's a very, if you want to know how The Fly was made, it's a wonderful documentary that has a lot of great info on it, and so they go into like deleted scenes and kind of failed points of the suit, and so they actually had the reason why there's stage 4 actually had a 4A and a 4B, and 4B was kind of a more kind of lumpy in between 4 and 5. So it was he looked far more like 5, except it was still a lot of Jeff Goldblum's face with just a lot of gross stuff all around it.
Yeah.
And also in that, when he is in that scene, there's only one sequence that they shot with him, and it's a cut scene where he decides that more things should be spliced together. And so he somehow gets a cat and his friendly little baboon and decides to fuse them together to see what happens. So he goes like
Ugh.
full mad scientist at this point. And what comes out is what they affectionately called the Baboon Cat. And it's a half baboon, half cat, like just stuck together in the middle, and it's just like this puppet that just
Oh my
freaks
god.
out and like bursts out of the pod and just starts running around everywhere. And Jeff Goldblum sees it, tries to touch it, and then freaks out and beats it to death with a lead pipe. Just comically smashes it over and over again. And it's like, because it's a puppet, they have to like put it inside this like wooden box so that the
Yeah.
guy could actually operate it from below. And so he's just beating the shit out of this baboon cat in a box, and then it just shows a close up of another version of the baboon cat completely smushed and just bloodied and gross. And that is
Lovely.
followed by a scene where he leaves the apartment by going through the window. And to do that, he's in a full rubber suit at this point, and he couldn't. They tricked it by building just like the side of the building on a slant, and they
Mhm.
just kind of tilted the camera so it looked like he was going vertically. Except
Yeah.
they couldn't get him to slide fast enough because the rubber kept catching on the fake walls. So they actually just had to
Yeah.
lubricate him in KY jelly. And they
Aw.
just said they used bottles and bottles of KY
Oh, that's
jelly
so
and just
gross.
covered him in it. And Jeff Goldblum definitely, he's a real good sport about all the prosthetics, but you could tell that was the part that he did not enjoy the most, because it's like, yeah, we had to do that a lot of times. And then they cut it from the movie. I was covered in so much KY jelly. He's just describing them lubing him up and just sliding down this building. And then
That
once he
sounds
slides down,
terrible.
he falls onto his back on like a landing, and then his stomach just starts pulsating. And they built an entire fake torso, and they stuck Jeff Goldblum's head and shoulders on top of it. Well, Jeff Goldblum's body was like in a hole, and they
Oh
just
my
had this whole
god.
fake torso, and the fake torso starts to pulsate and births out a little fly arm. And it's not as big as the one
Oh.
in the final movie. It's just like a little one. And Jeff Goldblum's so disgusted by it that for whatever reason his logic leads him to chewing it off himself and then
Ugh.
just throwing it away. And that scene was so disgusting that it caused a lady to leave the theater and go throw up in the bathroom during one of the viewings. And that's when they realized they had to remove it from the movie. So that, and then the next scene is when Jeff Goldblum bursts through the glass wall. So it was just
Oh,
like so
okay.
much to process for the audience. They're just like, no, I can't.
That's
And,
too much. The movie's already a lot to process. I can understand why they would remove that.
right?
It seems so unnecessary.
Well, yeah, and they just said it was so weird because it felt so out of character. Because like, why is he all of a sudden just wanting to fuse other things together? And like,
Yeah.
it's not very sympathetic for your hero to beat the shit out of a baboon
Yeah.
cat with a pipe, especially when you're the one that did it to it. So you're just torturing animals for no reason.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm glad they got rid of that.
yeah. So there's actually one more cutscene, which, oh my stars. It's they had an alternate ending originally to the Fly movie. There's another
Oh,
sequence after Gina Davis blows away the fly.
shit.
And it's it's her in bed with the other guy, the businessman. Uh,
Businessman.
and Gina Davis has a little nightmare and wakes up, and then you see the businessman is with her, and Gina Davis is pregnant again. And so one of the producers thought that it would be a good idea to have like a happy ending so that people could leave on a high note, kind of like the original Fly. And
Yes.
so their happy ending is Gina Davis falling back to sleep, and then we see her dream, and her dream is there's a tree branch, and on it is like a moth chrysalis, like a butterfly chrysalis,
Yeah.
and it's it's just there and starts like birthing, and it unfolds, and there's this naked stop motion baby hanging upside down that just unfolds these big giant butterfly wings, and it has these huge giant eyeballs, but they're still human eyes, and they're just these massive eyeballs on its head, and it's stop motion, so it looks so fake, and it starts flapping its wings, flies off the tree, and then flies towards heaven. It's just like this big beam of light in the sky, and the butterfly baby just flies away to heaven, and that was the end of the movie.
Wow. That
Is
is not a happy ending. It's
it's
also not a bad, I mean, it's a bad ending,
oh,
but
it's
like
bad.
not in a sad. It's not
No,
sad,
yeah,
it's
it's
just
like
bad.
yeah, it's like it makes sense. I can see the thought process as to why you would put it in there, but it looked it
Yeah.
and like they filmed it,
It's a
and it's
horror movie. It's a horror
yeah.
movie. It's fine for things to end in a non-happy way. It's okay.
Jeff Goldblum was so passionate about it not having that ending that he phoned up the producers and had a conversation with them about
Oh, really?
how they shouldn't put that in the movie. But it's funny because Jeff Goldblum was just talking about like how she shouldn't end up with the businessman guy. That
Oh,
was his
that's why.
greatest, that was his strongest point. He's like, they can't be together at the end of the movie. It's like, what about the moth baby? Apparently that
Like,
didn't
you
bother him.
would say that because you're the fly.
Yeah, exactly. You want your little butterfly baby. It's so stupid. It looks so dumb. If you can
Weird.
maybe on YouTube, just maybe look up the fly alternate butterfly baby fly ending or something.
Yes.
It must be on there. It's great. And they showed all these like really cool like models that they built when they were trying to figure out like how the fly was gonna look. This because they had no idea what the hell a half fly, half man was going to look like. So they
Yeah.
were just guessing at the beginning. And so essentially, they just made tons and tons of variants, these little busts of the final version of the fly. And they
Mhm.
had ones where, like, the front of his face kind of looked like a person, but then he had like fly eyes on the back of his head,
Oh,
and he had
weird.
like crazy mandibles. And there was like another one where he had like kind of like a human mouth, but he had like a shitload of tiny eyes all over his head, and
Whoa.
they all
That
of
would have
them
been
had
cool.
like ooze coming out of their mouths.
You gotta have that touch. You gotta have that
Oh,
Cronenberg touch.
yeah, it was like they knew the one thing they knew is that he was gonna have a crap load of slime coming out of him, and it was so they were really good. Like some of them are really unique and interesting looking. Like just listening how the guy's talking was like, oh, I just kind of whipped these up together as just little examples of what we could do. It's like, oh, these look amazing. Like holy crap, that's just something you do, huh? Just make all of these like, and there must have been 20 variants, and some of them kind of look
Oh,
like the
probably.
Predator, and so yeah, essentially they didn't know what they wanted, so they just told everyone in the studio just make as many as you can so that we could figure out what we don't want, and then hopefully that'll bring
Yeah.
us closer to what we do want. and, and they built the final version first, and then they went backwards from the end essentially to Jeff Bridges looking normal, and retrace their steps as to how he would
Jeff
transform. Jeff Goldblum,
Jeff
not Jeff
Goldblum.
Bridges.
Like,
Yeah,
not
it's
Jeff
wrong Jeff.
Bridges.
Wrong Jeff. But they essentially just worked backwards from their final version to figure out all the stages of the transformation and why he has so many great believable transformations, which is super smart that they figured that out. They're like, oh, okay, start from the end. We know what Jeff Goldblum looks like, and so they really were clever in how they figured out just how to ramp up the disgustingness of it so
Mhm.
well. And they did a very wonderful job on his stages, and then of course the after we get stage 5, we get stage 6, which is probably the most famous version. That's him in full Brundlefly mode when his
Ah, yes.
all of his flesh has fallen off his body and he is just a bug at this point. Essentially, he's
Yeah, and it
fully.
was really hard for them to move him too, right? Because they had to, like, move him on actual, like, boards on the floor, just, like, roll him across, and, like,
Yeah, yeah.
the feet would be moving, but, like, the whole mass would be, like,
Yeah, yeah,
translating.
yeah. So essentially, he's on like this big dolly, and they just
Yeah.
kind of roll. Yeah, they roll the whole thing, and the whole body, yeah, is on this cart, and then yeah, the bottom half is operated by two guys for each leg. And it's so funny how slow they have to do it. Like when it's filming, it looks so fake. So it's just
It looks terrible, and, like,
super
obviously, as animators, we're watching the foot. It's funny because there was one part where David Cronenberg's like, "Oh, that looked great," and I was like, "No."
yeah. Oh, like
Because
what they
the
did is
foot
that the foot
they
test? Yeah.
yeah, the close-up of the foot, on the ground, and it was just like, you would expect a foot to kind of go like this, and then get up, and then go,
Yeah.
but it was like
It looks so
like,
weightless.
on the tiptoes, and it was sliding the whole time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that one was like you could tell kind of how they cheated it, just kind of how it moved, because that specific shot was one of the other puppets that was just its legs, because it kind of like
Yeah.
also separate. They had like a puppet that was just the legs, and then a puppet that was also just the torso and the head, just so that they for certain shots they could, I guess, articulate it more. Because yeah, the
Mhm.
full body one was just like kind of. They essentially said it was just like a normal puppet, like how like a Muppet uses little sticks in their arms to like move the arms. But they said it was so difficult because normally when you move like a person puppet, you move one to one, like the limb moves with the exact same distance as
Yes, yeah.
you. But he said with the fly, like one of his arms is all gimpy and can't really move, so you're applying all this force, but the arm just goes like but the other arm is like going like this. So
Yeah.
they said it was so difficult to actually make it look like it moved in a
Oh,
believable way. I can.
yeah, watching one sequence where you could see them moving the fly, and it was the part where I can't remember. I think he was trying to grab at something, and then he had to, like, turn around, and he was holding something, and he was turning around, and
Mhm.
halfway through the movement, the arm went a little bit limp, and you could see the guy underneath it was trying so hard to just, like, keep the hand up because it took all of his strength, and Cronenberg was just like, "Alright, that looked okay, but make sure that arm stays alive, it can't go limp," and the guy's like, "Okay."
No problem.
He's like holding this, and the next take, like it was moving, but he's just like, like
It looked
trying
like
to get it.
such a nightmare.
And it still looked super, like, a little janky, but it was like, I mean, it's the best you're gonna get with that thing.
Yeah,
Like,
on it. Yeah, I guess at a certain point, you just kind of have to accept that it's not going to get any better than what it already like what you get. Like you kind of
that looked
have to.
like a pain in the ass puppet to move around because so asymmetrical and heavy,
Well, yeah, yeah,
huge.
that was the biggest thing. Yeah, they said like asymmetry makes it so much harder to do,
Yeah,
and
because
it's
yeah, you'd expect puppets to be symmetrical because that's as animators, it's always everything's
nicer.
symmetrical that you work with, so it makes sense for the movements to be appealing, and it's yeah,
Not if
something
you're a
ugly and
Brundlefly.
yeah, something that is just butt ugly and slimy and asymmetrical. It's gonna be rough to
Yeah,
move around.
it's so impressive how it didn't look stupid because it like when you just see the puppet without like all of the lighting and the effects and like how it moves and like the goop, it looks
Yeah.
so fake. It looks just like a big rubber monster, and the guy's just kind of moving its arm. It doesn't look scary at all, and
Yeah.
he's talking about. He's like, yeah, they sent me like a color test, and I didn't care because we needed the model. So even if it was purple, I would have said it looked fine. I just didn't care at that point. I was so tired. We had so much to do.
It's as much as good as it was ever going to get, so
Yeah, yeah. I think like that was an overarching theme of the end of the movie because yeah, the last 5 minutes of the movie was the longest shooting for the entire sequent movie shoot, and it was three
Mhm.
weeks to just do 5 minutes of footage at the end, just because there's so much happening, and just even when they start to break down like the little explosions that are happening all over the place, the little lighting effects that are happening all over the place, like the timing for all of that was so difficult to like. It was like a dance or something, essentially, like making sure that certain things happened when other things were happening and that they happened in a certain way. And so like they had an entire area built underneath the floor of Jeff Goldblum's warehouse where there's just like an army of effects artists just down there
Yes.
setting up like explosions and making sure that crap was happening at certain times. And apparently there was a real danger. They started out by using propane explosions, which I guess was a normal thing that they used, but it turns out that the propane was pooling underneath the floor where all the effects artists were.
Oh my
So
god.
they had to stop using it because they were worried they're going to blow them all up because they're
Yeah.
trapped under there with a bunch of pooling propane and all this shit
That's
happening
bad.
above them. So they went with like
Wow.
phosphorus explosions. So they
Yeah.
instead, so that they didn't have to deal with any gas seeping down into the poor effects artists. So they're not sleeping,
Jeez.
they're getting paid the least, and they're
Yeah.
also in a room that's filling up with propane.
Sounds great.
It ain't easy making a movie. You gotta, you
Oh
gotta
my
want to make
god.
it.
And then meanwhile, the actors get to do the fun stuff.
Yeah,
They're
they're
getting
having a
paid
good
the
old time.
most.
Yeah, they were, they're talking, it's like, oh, it's difficult with the goop. It's like, oh, it was difficult when I had to breathe
Oh, was
propane.
it? Oh, I'm sorry you had to wear a bunch of Vaseline all over your body. I
Yeah,
was I was working in a pool of gasoline while you guys were shooting guns upstairs, so you can fuck
thanks.
off.
Yeah, it's so funny just hearing the contrast from the effects guys' version of how the movie was made, and then like the actors. They're like, "Oh, it was just a really fun time, you know. It was really calm."
Yeah.
And it's like they're talking about it's like, "Oh, it's like I don't need rehearsal. I just want to like talk through it, and then we can just start the process." And and then these guys are just busting their ass behind the scenes just trying to get
Yeah.
everything like possibly working right, and they were all so stressed the entire time. And so they for the sequence with businessman when businessman tries to save the day and immediately fucks it up. and
Yes.
he and yeah, once he the point in which he gets his foot melted off, the way they got that effect working was they built a hole in the floor and stuck his real foot in it, and then they just put like a fake foot over top of it, and he just had to sit there for a week with with his foot stuck in a hole, and he couldn't move because he had to be in the same spot the whole time until he actually did something. So he was just sitting there doing nothing, and there was two effects guys that were in charge of his foot underneath the stage, so that any time a foot effects had to happen, they would just like pump some blood or do something. And so apparently they just had to sit there for like hours and hours on end doing nothing while they were just waiting for the
My
sequence
god.
to happen. And so they decided that they got so bored that they just started messing with the actor's foot, businessman actor. He's like, because his foot is trapped, he can't see what's happening, and it's just dangling. Or it was on like a little platform, and so they would just randomly at points take away the platform and replace it with a big bucket of oatmeal.
Oh.
And just stick his foot in there, and he
It's
couldn't do anything
very
about it.
exfoliating.
Yes, exactly. it's his luscious, beautiful skin, so soft.
Oh, you'll have one foot that is very nice and exfoliated and moisturized.
It's so funny
The other
because
one's just gonna be gross.
they videotaped it too because they were so bored. So there's actual video footage of the documentary of them laughing their asses off, where it's just like,
That's so funny.
and you hear the actor from above. He's like, oh, "You got my pant leg that time." Like, he's so unimpressed. He's like, but he can't do anything about it. So it's just like, oh, okay, whatever. And they put my freaking foot in oatmeal again. Just
That sounds like I feel like yeah, I feel like if I was an effects artist, sounds like stuff I would get up to, just annoying actors and
oh, get your sweet
I mean,
revenge on them being picky.
yeah, me as like a 20-year-old effects artist, I feel like yes.
Yeah, and they were all super young too. It's hilarious seeing them, like they
It
all
makes
just
sense. If
yeah.
they're all just these young effects artists, they're just gonna fuck with you. It's like, I wouldn't wanna put my foot in their hands.
No, no. They also
As, like,
decided
my current self, I would be respectful of the actor's foot, but,
yeah.
previous younger me, no, not at all.
Oh, exactly. You're making this weird movie
No
about a
respect
guy
for your
turning into a
foot.
fly. Well, and it was
Fuck your
like,
foot.
it's apparently that was David Cronenberg's first like production film because I guess everything else was really low budget before. But like, yeah, all of those guys came from like indie movies, so they're just used to probably messing around all the time and pranking each other because you got to pass the time
'Cause why
somehow.
not?
Exactly, it makes the
Yeah.
day more enjoyable. They would also tape porn to his leg. It was
Why?
just I don't
Just
know,
corn.
just
Something
porn.
they had.
Just decided to, yeah, yeah, two guys stuck under the floor long periods of time. I guess they just started looking at porn.
Oh, you said porn. I thought you
Yeah, no
said
porn.
corn.
Yeah, not corn.
We're just gonna stick some cobs of corn to this guy's foot. It's like, well,
It's got
that's
all
a
these like
random choice.
just random bits of food all over the place.
They
That's all
just
they
ate
had.
a lot of corn,
Yeah,
so
they're
I
really
mean,
weird.
yeah, porn, porn makes more sense.
Yeah, yeah, that makes it.
Sadly.
I could definitely picture two visual effects dudes sitting under a stage just looking at porn mix. It's not a hard leap to
God.
make.
Having imagine doing that with like a coworker.
Really bizarre.
Sounds
Again,
terrible.
yeah, it would be fun, but I guess you got to pass the time
They
somehow.
they are weirdos, those guys, those
I
foot
would imagine
guys.
they're probably pretty quirky if your job is to make a bunch of goop and blood everywhere. So
Yeah.
yeah, they,
And they were like demoted to foot duty.
yeah,
They clearly were the least important of the effects dudes.
they were probably the ones that were the fuck ups that
Like
they kept, but
right out of school or
yeah,
something. That's
you
what
got
it
foot
seems like.
duty. Yeah, you're not doing any of the important stuff. You're just sitting here, and
You're
let me
guarding
tell you,
this foot. Yeah.
pump some blood. So
Pumps of blood. Yeah.
they also made an amazing fake version because the one that he barfs on, there was another cut scene where Brundlefly actually eats the contents of his goopy foot, and
Oh
so
yeah, I was waiting for that to happen.
oh yeah, so that they did have it in the movie at one point, and they did extensive like makeup and effects tests. So there's tons of footage of this whole fake robotic head that they made of Jeff Goldblum, and it has like this mouth that can just like widen and contract,
Ooh.
and it all can also, I don't know how they did it. It's like it has like a little conveyor belt inside of its mouth, so it can like suck things into it.
Oh, it's like a vacuum.
Oh, it's so gross. And so he's holding, because the hands are fake. So it's like one person is the hands and another person is just the head. And he's
Yeah.
holding this foot with all of this like melted goop inside of it. And there's just like a
Yeah.
little nubbit of his bone sticking out. And he just like sucks up the bone into the robotic
Ooh.
mouth. It looks so gross.
Oh.
He's so slimy, but I guess they couldn't.
Surprised they didn't keep that.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was just like a pacing problem or something. Like I don't know if it just lingered
Probably.
too much on it, but they
It's a
gave
lot going on.
yeah, you already had a lot going on without him eating a foot out of nowhere, I
Yeah.
guess. But they gave that businessman actor the fake foot afterwards with all the goop in it, and he kept it
Yeah.
in his fridge for years. He said he just had this fake
Really?
he had this fake foot in his fridge because I guess whatever it was made out of it had to be refrigerated, and so like he lived in
Oh,
this apartment in New York, he said, and he's like the local kids figured out that he was the guy that had this gross fake foot in his fridge. So like kids would knock on his door and be like, "Hey, can we see the foot?" It would like it's just like kids would randomly knock on his
it's
door.
so
Just
funny.
yeah, he's like, "Those were some of the best
Oh.
years of my life." He was so happy about it.
I would love to be that person. Are you
Right?
that weird lady with the fake foot in your fridge?
Can I see the foot?
I say the fake foot. That's
it
funny.
was it was wonderful. Yeah, so he was the real game about it, and yeah, they were all really stoked to be just kind of a part of it. And clearly, like all the actors had so much fun. Like Gina Davis is talking about how fun it was, and it's like, oh yeah, I love horror movies, so I don't care about the goop or anything like that. It's like I just didn't
Oh,
want to
that's
get
cool.
sticky. and, That
Oh,
was
that's cool. Who would have thought she likes horror movies?
yeah. Apparently, she's like a huge horror fan, so she was like, yeah, it's like I can watch
Nice.
anything. So you one day we're gonna get you to become Gina Davis.
Yeah, one day I will be Gina Davis.
You watch all the goopy horror you can get
She's
your hands
better
on.
than me right now. She was in The Fly, so she can handle anything.
Right. You can get through that. You can get through anything. And
Yes.
so yeah, he so the goop continues with the the very first experience with the baboon when he turns inside out. He that was also a puppet. Well, of course it was a puppet. And it was
Yes.
just kind of like it was two guys, Chris Wayless and another guy, and they were in underneath the floor because they had the whole area, and they were underneath the pod in this like little chamber underneath the pod,
Mhm.
and they were both operating the bits, and inside of the puppet was just a tube of blood that just continuously shot out blood continuously because
Oh,
they needed a continuous flow to make sure that like the blood kind of covered the whole puppet and made it look
yeah.
really wet because if they didn't have it continuously pumping, it looked too dry and fake. So even though in the scene there's not like a ton of blood shooting everywhere, there's just a constant flow of it, and there's actually a drain below the puppet that's draining out the excess blood and just keeping the amount of blood that they needed to keep it moist.
Oh, wow.
And uh,
Nice.
unfortunately, that drain, again, these poor effects guys, was right over top of where the two puppeteers were puppeting the puppet, and so they were getting covered in a continuous drenching of blood. And as Chris Wayless
God.
describes it, he's like, it's not just like a little bit of blood; it's like liters and liters of it
Oh
constantly
my
pumping. It's
god.
like it was a literal shower of blood falling on us, and they called cut. Everyone left, and we're just standing there covered in blood, and it's slowly like cooling and like thickening.
Oh, gross.
So they're just left there, just covered in fake blood, just tons and tons of it.
Oh my god, can you imagine
Just
just what it would look like? Like, I hope there were showers on the premises.
oh wow, yeah, there must have been so many people having to take showers after every day of like
Or
having
just
to.
like a hose somewhere, just a hose.
Yeah, it's like the goop cleaning wash station.
Yes.
It has like an eye wash station. Like,
Yeah, because you'd need it.
oh my god, it's pretty disgusting how just like yeah the buckets of blood and goop and gore and just how much they had to go through. There's really funny video tests of Jeff Goldblum in the fly suit when they did the first test to see what it would look like with him on it,
Yeah.
and it's like. Sometimes he's kind of moving like the fly, but other times he's just moving like Jeff Goldblum. And he's kind of
Yes.
like standing there, and he's like, just in this fly suit. He's like at one point he's like
That's so
pruning his
funny.
hair, but it's like all like the fly hair, so it's all balding
Oh,
everywhere. He's just like
nasty.
licking his lips. He has like no teeth. He just starts dancing at
Oh,
one point in it.
of
It's
course he does. So
it's
Jeff Goldblum.
it's wonderful to see the tests of that footage. Just him being so happy, but he said that definitely wearing that was not so enjoyable. But he also understood that he was like, yeah, I feel really bad for the effects guys because I was there for a few hours, but like they had to arrive like 4 hours before me just to prep all of the stuff that then they would put on me for the next 3 or 4 hours. So it's like
Fuck.
their whole day was just getting this suit together, and then between every shot, yeah, they were doing touch-ups and making
What
sure that
long days. Oh my god. Just
yeah,
don't sleep.
no, it was cool.
Shooting a
There's
movie.
one of the one of the editors. He has this crazy story. He's like this really monotone talking guy, and he's just like, yeah, it was really hard being on the fly. So we were working like 20 hours a day. I recall this one time where I was just doing editing on the science text that comes on the screen when when it's describing
Yeah.
all the fly pod stuff, all this text came on the screen. And you can tell he's like reliving it in the moment. He's like, the text went really slow, so I had to hand he cut out every frame that I didn't need so that I could get the appropriate speed for
Oh.
the text to go through. And when you're doing that at 3 a.m., you can get pretty tense. I remember throwing my assistant Spicer through the wall, right through the drywall. He said he just picked it up and just threw it. He threw it so hard it went clear through the wall. It, like disturbed
What was
it. Like,
it? A spicer? What's a
yeah, it was like
spicer?
I guess like I don't know, like a salt shaker or something maybe. Like
Oh,
I'm just
okay.
curious. I don't know, like if someone offered him like food or maybe like some seasoning for what something he was eating, but apparently he did not take it well.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay. Well,
he sort of
I have been that person that edits out frames of a sequence, but
yeah.
not to this degree, I don't think.
Well, and probably like the process it was like probably so like archaic compared to how you can
Oh,
do it
back
now.
now it's like, oh, we got Premiere Pro. It's not that hard, but it's the 80s, so
This guy's like like
this
doing it
is
on
like
VHS tapes and
film. This is film, so it's not
cutting it out.
digital. Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Just like it
Gross.
must have been a nightmare.
No, thank you. Yeah, I can't really equate my experience at all to that because I was just scrolling in Premiere Pro and just pressing C to like cut it, and then another C, and then da, da, da.
Right? So
Anyways.
it's a movie. Why would anyone get upset about that? It's fine.
Ah, so rude. Okay,
It,
continue.
well, it's hilarious. Yeah, because apparently, like the editing team too was just like completely put up against the wall. Like it's so weird that this was like the first studio movie, but everyone was more stressed out on it than any other movie they'd ever done before,
Yeah.
and they were just so strapped for time constantly. They said there was like a whole team of editors just editing all at the same time, trying to get it cut. And I don't know, I'm not sure the how long it takes to edit a movie or how long people get to edit a movie, but they did it in like 2.5 months,
Okay.
whatever that is. But he said there was just tons of footage because they filmed so much of like all the
Sounds
effects.
like they just filmed everything, and then we're just like, okay, well, let's make movie with this.
Time to make movie.
Let's make a movie,
Yeah,
please.
it just comes out and it's done. And
Well,
so
I feel like with David, sorry to interrupt,
no, no,
but
no.
it feels like with David Cronenberg, he's very methodical with his directing as well. So he would have many options in case one thing doesn't work. So he's filmed all this stuff as backup, and he's
Mhm.
gonna this is like the the longest possible option, but if that doesn't work, we can do this and we can do this. So it's probably like we have only so many days to shoot this, so many resources. We're going to film as much shit as we can and cover all of our bases.
Yeah,
So I can
yeah.
understand, but it makes it hard for every like post production.
Well, yeah, because David Cronenberg eventually wrote the final version of the script, and and he directed it. So they actually had an interview with the original script writer, and he was
Oh
talking about
yeah.
how Mel Brooks hated his like writing style because they said it was too flowery, and like Mel Brooks like called him into his office after he read it and just like tore him like a new ass essentially, and he
Funny because you always picture Mel Brooks being like the sweetest person,
yeah.
but he's apparently a giant, like just really specific and can be
Oh
very
yeah.
harsh.
I wrote down specifically what he told him in his interview. If I say it's wrong because I'm a genius and I'm always right.
What the fuck,
That's what he
dude?
told him. What an ego.
Makes me hate Mel Brooks now, but it's like
Oh man. So yeah, he
I
just
loved his movies.
makes great movies, but I guess well, like James Cameron's a huge prick, but all his movies are super
That's
successful. So
true.
I guess if you make really good art, you could definitely
There's
be.
always people that are very talented that know they're very talented. So,
Yeah,
makes sense. He's
yeah.
ultra talented, so he's an ultra ego.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's what keeps him alive.
His ego,
His
yeah.
ego won't let him die. He's like, I believe I'm immortal.
It's funny because sometimes I mix him up with Gene Wilder, like
Yeah, I
just
can see
because
that.
they're like very similar looking, but I
Yeah.
need to remember that Gene Wilder was actually like the sweetest human being alive, but Mel Brooks just is a bit of an asshole. So one's good, one's not.
It's a dick. Yeah,
One's a dick. Both
yeah.
talented though.
Yeah. They make great movies. Just don't work with him, and he'll be fine. Just enjoy the
Yeah,
movies.
just joy.
Yeah, it's fine. So yeah, he was pretty critical of the original one, and so they got eventually they originally wanted David Cronenberg to direct the movie, but he was actually, I never knew this, but David Cronenberg was going to make Total Recall.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I had no idea that he was going to make Total Recall. Like,
That would have been a very crazy movie.
what would David Cronenberg's Total Recall look like? I can't even.
Because Total Recall is already super crazy.
Yeah, exactly. It would just be like a different form of crazy, and
It would
probably a
be
lot
a little darker and grosser.
goopier.
Not as funny.
No, I don't think it would have that satirical side
No.
to it, where it's like, oh, this is funny. They're making fun of how shitty people are. It's like, oh no, this is just horrifying looking.
This is just terrible. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I'm pretty happy that the guy who made RoboCop made Total Recall instead. But so apparently, yeah, he was going to make it, but then it fell through at the final. I guess like the right before he was going to sign on to do it, he decided, nah, I don't want to make it for whatever reason, and so that happened to line up with their second choice and the original director of the movie. He was this English guy, and he was some indie film director, and he has a super tragic story where right before they started
Oh yeah.
filming, his family was vacationing in South Africa, and his daughter died somehow. His little girl died in a
Yeah.
tragic accident, and he, of course, left the movie, and he like waited like a month, and he tried to like see if he would be okay, and then Mel Brooks
It's
phoned him
such an
up.
emotionally charged movie. I don't know how you could.
Well,
Like
that's what
with
he.
any, because
Yeah,
it it covers like the long and slow painful death of, yeah,
of a
Seth.
loved one. So yeah, it's like
Yeah.
that's probably the exact wrong type of movie to be a
Yeah.
part of when you're in that sort of mental
Curious what it would have
state.
turned out like with a different director though. That's kind of interesting, but
It was, yeah.
wouldn't be this movie.
No. Well, it's interesting because they, at the very end of the documentary, they interview him again, and he says he's never watched The Fly, and he doesn't think he could because one, it would trigger all of the memories of that time with his family, which he really doesn't want to relive. And he also said that
Yeah.
he knows that the movie he was going to make was going to look a lot different than what The Fly ended up being. He did admit that
Yeah.
he definitely understands that what David Cronenberg made was a good movie and, is remembered fondly, but at the
Yes.
same time, it's like he said it was very different from what he was going to do. And he
Yeah.
had such a particular vision for what it was going to be. He's just like, no, I will never watch that movie.
No, that's sad, but I understand.
Yeah. So actually, there's the story of Mel Brooks actually not being a scumbag because he gave him 3 months and said, "We'll just put the whole movie on hold for 3 months and let you, hopefully try to work through this, and we'll see what happens in 3 months." And then so he did wait 3 months. He put it on hold, and then afterwards, he told Mel Brooks, he's like, "Oh yeah, I can't do the movie," and he completely understood, and he didn't like get pissed or anything. He's like,
Good.
so
That's good.
he was at least
It
he can be a
it
nice
might be the
person.
case where it's like he's a stickler when it comes to stuff to do with his job, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Where it's
yeah,
like
really
he's gonna
details.
be, yeah, it's in an arena that he's very gifted in. So it's like it's almost like he has a right to be an asshole, unfortunately, when it comes to like scripts and movies. It's like he
Yeah,
knows what he's talking about.
yeah,
He's just kind of
yeah,
a dick about it. But
yeah. I
at
mean, like,
least when it comes to familial problems, it's like, okay, at least he's being a human being at this point.
yeah. He put his producer
Yeah.
hat down and put on his human hat.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was that.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That's probably exactly how it happened. But yeah, so we'll just go from that delightful story to talking about the baboon. We'll really
I read a little bit of what you wrote.
oh boy. Yeah, so the baboon, who's a wonderful character in the movie, his real name is Typhoon the Baboon, and he uh, he was a very interesting creature on the set, and everyone really liked him, and he was like really friendly. But the trainer was really
Oh no.
intense and strict with him, because apparently like the trainer had to convince the baboon that he was the alpha, because if he wasn't the alpha, that meant the baboon would think it's the alpha, and then it would start attacking people and like
Whoa.
trying to dominate people. He said he would just like lift up his lip and be like, it's because of this that I treat him this way, because he has these crazy fangs, and like baboons are so strong. They're
Oh,
like, I think he said they're 6 times stronger than humans.
oh
So
my god.
because
It,
they could like rip a person's face off essentially. So there's this one scene where when the baboon gets turned into inside out baboon, well, during the making of it, they put the baboon inside of the pod, and they filmed the scene, except it didn't quite go so well the first time they did it, because they didn't think about how putting a baboon inside of an enclosed space with blinding flashing lights might set it off and might cause it to get a little upset. And what happened was the light went off, it flipped its shit, and it's so strong that it ripped the entire door of the teleporter pod off and threw it across the room, and then proceeded to start running around and destroying the set and just like wrecking shit. And the trainer had
oh
to come
my
in
god.
and like calm him down. People had to like get away from him, and so
Holy shit.
it was a whole thing. So after that, they thought it would be a good idea to put the trainers actually inside the pod with the baboon in every shot that
Okay.
the baboon is inside the pod, because
Those poor trainers.
well, yeah, you can see like I guess it's they. I don't know if you can see it in the movie, but like there's a shot of the movie where you can just kind of like after the flash happens, you just kind of see this trainer's arm going like reaching out and kind of like touching the baboon at one point to calm it down.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that's in the final movie, but you can just kind of see it in this one shot that they showed.
Oh wow.
And yeah, he so also for the sequence when Brundlefly is in the pod. They said that
Yeah.
was another one of the really horrible, like miserable filming experiences, because it took so many people to operate Brundlefly. There was 8 people, and they said that they had a few like panels that could be removed from the pod so that people could reach in, but they said that pretty much 8 of them were all jammed really close together trying
Yeah.
to
Oh,
operate the fly. And just look at monitors to see what it's doing and moving the parts, and like a guy's ordering the individual pieces to move certain ways, and like getting the mandibles to work. And he said it was just a horrible nightmare.
that sounds terrible.
Yeah, so anyways, the definitely the most interesting story that came from the documentary is save the best for last. I swear to God, this is it really in the documentary, and it is a 5-minute sequence where multiple people are discussing in detail what I'm about to describe. And so Typhoon the baboon was apparently raised by a lovely blonde haired woman, and that gave Typhoon a certain I don't know taste for any woman that looked like his original owner. So the the onset designer happened to look like the baboon's original owner, and so anytime that she would be on set and the baboon would see him. As the guy described it in the documentary, he's like, baboons can't write poetry or express themselves. So Typhoon expressed himself by showing his love by having a full erection every time she was there. And then the documentary
Oh
proceeds to show shot after shot after shot of this baboon walking around and sitting down with a massive erection.
no.
And
Oh my
they show him
god.
walking across a table, his giant boners hanging out. He's like sitting down in the telepod. He just has this massive erection. He's just sitting in there. And it was apparently just always there.
Oh my
So
god.
the trainer had this special, for lack of a better term, penis paint that he would spray onto the baboon's penis to blend it in with the color of his fur, so you couldn't
Oh
see the
no.
erection. And so,
Oh, is it
if
in the movie?
well, I don't know. I don't really want to go in and check, but if you would like to do a slow frame by frame, I bet some sicko out there could find some rock
I'm
hard
just
baboon
curious if they
penis.
did. I'm not gonna look, don't
No,
worry.
no. I couldn't believe how much footage they had of just this baboon and his erection. Like I was like, why did they film so much of
I mean,
this?
there's cameras all over that set, so you could film anything.
Yeah, yeah. It's just
They
like
probably couldn't get around filming it, to be honest, so it just exists.
it does. Yeah, they said it was a real difficulty trying to keep it concealed, but
Oh my god.
didn't go
That's
well.
insane. That's such
Yeah,
a random story. I wasn't expecting because I sort of just was like skimming it
perusals.
as you were talking, and I was like, "What?" I
What?
just
As I was
didn't
writing it, I
remember
was like,
this
oh my god,
existing.
I can't believe I'm writing this. You
Oh,
tastefully note this.
oh my god.
So
Okay,
yeah, so Typhoon,
that's
and then finally we'll get to the last stage of Brundlefly, stage 7, which is when Brundlefly has completely come. He's fused with the teleporter, and he just kind of fish flops out of it. And they said that Chris Wayla said that they called that thing was just, he's like, that thing was a piece of junk. He's just talking
yeah.
about it. And he's just like so upset.
He
And
sounded so pissed.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, at one point in the interview, he's like, oh, he stops his explanation to just interject himself and say, he's like, oh yeah, it's all coming back to me now. Oh, this is all very triggering for me. And
Yeah.
so he starts talking about the Brundlefly fusion thing, which I didn't know this actually. I don't think this was in the documentary, but apparently it's called Brundle Booth and Brundle Thing by the crew,
Yeah.
which I didn't know.
Nice.
So I don't know where you found that out, but that's interesting fact. They only refer
Yeah.
to it in the documentary as the space bug. That's kind of
Oh, yeah.
that was the thing they called
Space bug.
space bug. And so he was apparently actually, it was the last thing that they made because it's made up of all of the cannibalized parts from the other Brundlefly
Yeah.
puppets. And they just, he said it was like, he's like, yeah, there's parts where it's just held together with saran wrap and like hot glue. And
That's
so they said,
amazing.
yeah, they said like the whole body is a huge piece of garbage.
It
And
worked so well in the movie, like, you don't need to see much of it,
no,
so
no, it works great, and that's what he even said. He's like, I was amazed that it turned out as well as it did. Like, it actually looks pretty good, but because
yeah, it does.
yeah, they said the head was like the original close-up head, so it had the most articulation, and so he said that's why the head looked good. But other than that, it was pretty much like just pieces of junk that they stuck
Yeah,
together.
and that's kind of what he would be at that point anyway, so
That's a very good point. Yeah, he was pretty much just general garbage. And oh,
Yep.
actually, the one thing I forgot about is to mention is how the head works. When it
Oh,
turns
yeah.
into Brundlefly, when his like
Yeah.
if his Jeff Goldblum head fully like falls off of his
Yeah.
face, they actually had this really cool animatronic setup for the head where
Mhm.
it's they first built the space bug head as the first head, and then over top of that they built the Jeff Goldblum head, and in between the two heads they installed these little hydraulic plates that could push the whole face out, and so they could just activate this button and these little hydraulic plates would start to push against the flesh of the outer head and peel it off and break away so that it would fall off as the hydraulics pushed out the alien bug head. And so it's impressive. I don't know how the hell someone thought of that, but
Yeah.
somehow, and so like they had this button that could just like compress the head back in, so it was kind of like Jeff Goldblum head, and then
Yeah.
go outwards to Bughead. It
really
is.
cool. I saw a little clip of that and it was like Gina I remember Cronenberg was like, "Gina, can you get that snot off of there?" And she's like, see her finger come in and she's just like, "What?"
Yeah, it's so funny, like hearing David Cronenberg in the background, just kind of like, okay, yeah, so just make sure to we keep doing this, and like they're talking, kind of
Yeah.
like just kind of joking around, and you just be like, okay, no, this is serious. We're gonna talk about the slime, and like he's still saying
Yes.
nonsense, so he keeps saying like, this is serious. It's like we're gonna talk
Yes.
about the just because it sounds so ridiculous. Like when he's like, okay, so we need to make
It
sure the
does.
slime coming off the side of his face is okay, and they like for the melting hand sequence, they actually had like an original hand. Like eventually they did it as like a special effect where they superimposed this fake hand melting over top of his,
Oh,
and that's why
okay,
they had to
yep.
keep it so perfectly still because it was just like two plates on
Yes.
top of each other.
Yeah.
But
That's
originally,
why it's sort of stupid because it was just
yeah,
like he's just standing there perfectly like this.
that's probably why it looks like he should be able to move his hand away, because, or at least he would maybe move his hand a little bit because it hurt so bad. But he's just like,
Yeah.
oh, oh,
I know
staring at it like,
exactly.
oh no. And so
Oh dear.
it was just like, yeah, but the first one just had like this tube in it, and it just oozed out this like thick purple gunk that was like his
Ooh.
hand melting, and it just kept oozing out, but they couldn't control it. So like by the time the shot ended, the actor just had so much melted goop going down his hand that it looked like there's so much more goop than even his hand originally was. There's just like this huge
Oh yeah.
pile of it on the ground underneath him, and so that they decided to scrap that.
Yeah. It worked for what it was.
Yeah, it was a fun, and
Yeah.
also you could tell that David Cronenberg taught that to his son because that exact style is in Possessor as well when the lady's face melts.
Hey.
So a little reference
Lovely.
to Papa's work.
Papa's book.
Papa. But yeah, that's about all I could dig up on the lovely
Woo!
special effects. There's like a few
That's
other little tidbits here and there, but that was about the bulk of disgustingness. And it's
good
again, I'd say
chunk though.
try to watch the documentary because it's
Yeah.
the visuals are really a huge part of it because they have so much footage that they show of behind the scenes stuff and makeup tests. It's really great to just interesting to learn about.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot going on.
It's,
Man. I'm just like I'm interested, but I'm also kind of grossed out by it, so I
it's
need a
hard.
breath. Um
Oh, you would not like some of the like the test footage they use because it just lingers on this disgusting slimy face, and it's just like the bone test when it's they're trying to like see if the mouth can eat the
oh
guy's foot.
gross.
It's just like constantly going in and out of his mouth. It's like and it's like all goopy, and he's holding this
Oh.
shoe that's filled with goop.
Ew.
It just holds on it for like a minute, just.
Oh, gross.
So yeah,
Well,
I don't think you like that part. You might find the
lovely.
behind
Well,
the scenes worse than the movie.
great. Yeah, it's funny because it's God. Yeah, I'm glad you looked up most of that stuff because it's I was trying to find the documentary, so maybe it's fate that I couldn't find it.
It was for the best.
The universe is like, no, Emma, don't. You're fine. You barely watched the movie, so chill
You
out a
don't need
bit.
this in your life.
Just just watch the original Fly, which is what what I'm gonna get into now. Now that
Yes.
we've gone through all the grossness, I'm
Get to the
actually gonna talk about the
silliness.
original Fly, which is very silly. So the Fly that we were just speaking about, um, which what year was it? 1983,
Yeah,
something.
I think it was 1983.
1983 is actually a recreation of the original
1986.
film. 1986. Okay, perfect. Which was a recreation of the original film The Fly in 1958, which was actually based on the short story, also called The Fly, by French British writer George Langelan, which, funnily enough, was initially published in the June 1957 issue of Playboy magazine.
It's so weird. That's its origin
Why?
story. Like
That's its
Playboy?
origin
Like what was the
in
short story?
Playboy magazine. But it made so I'm gonna get into the short story because I found the short story and I read the short story and then I watched the recreation, like the movie, and the
Mm-hmm.
movie really stays quite close to the short story, except for some minor differences, which are it makes sense for the time, the era,
Mm-hmm.
just because almost every movie in those days ended with such positive endings.
Oh yes.
And yeah, the short story, yeah, didn't end happily. So
Oh, okay. Okay. So the short story actually
yeah,
does have a darker ending.
it does. It's a little abrupt though. It's kind of funny, but yeah, so the short story, I'll just give a somewhat brief overview. Um the main character is Francois Delambre. You can tell it's very
Ooh.
French. And I think it's actually supposed to be in Quebec, which is funny.
Oh dang. The Cronenberg
The
connection. There you go. It's all
Cronenberg
Canadian.
connection. Francois Delambre is awakened by the telephone. His sister-in-law, Helene, I think it's Helene, that's how it's pronounced in
Oh,
the movie.
oh, I'm not good with French
Helene,
names.
his sister-in-law, Helene, is calling to tell him that she has just killed her husband and his
Mm.
brother, and
Oh,
that he should call the police.
oh,
He's like, "What?
she killed two
That's weird.
people.
Why?" No, she only killed her husband.
Oh, okay.
So her husband also happens to be his brother, Francois's
Oh,
brother,
oh, gotcha. Okay,
because it's Helene is Francois's sister-in-law.
okay, okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
All
Just
the.
like, making sure all the pieces are being puzzled together. So he does. He calls the police and arrives at the scene. And he has discovered that Helene actually killed him by crushing his head and right arm under a hydraulic machine press.
What a good. It's very
Helene,
Terminator death.
it's very, yeah, it's like very intense for a 1950s short
How
story.
would you keep someone in a hydraulic press long enough to crush their head with it? Like I see that'd be a really difficult thing to pull off.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, I'll get into it. I'll get into it.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
um, yeah, and then where am I? Yes, Helene refuses to explain why she has killed her husband and is sent to a mental asylum.
I don't know this.
Francois takes custody of Helene's young son, Henri. After years
Henri.
of interrogation, it seems like it's used in the short story, but I'm not 100% sure. Helene never relents, apart from one day where she curiously inquires about the lifespan of a housefly.
Mm.
I actually think it might have been a few months. There's some holes in this story that I'm realizing now. Anyways,
It
that
was a
same
short story
evening.
published in Playboy, you know.
That's very true. Don't take it too seriously. So let's say after a few months of interrogation, Helene never relents, apart from one day where she curiously inquires about the lifespan of a housefly. That same evening, Henri, her son, mentions something about a housefly with a strange head. So some pieces are being put together. Since Francois is looking after Henri, he's around him a lot, and so he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's curious because your mom was also talking about a housefly. You're talking about a housefly.
Mm.
What's going on with you two?" So Francois,
Your interest in flies, you friggin' weirdos.
yeah, there's all this fly nonsense going on, and
Yeah.
as she's being held in this asylum, a lot of the maids notice that she's always catching flies and looking at them and then releasing them. So she's constantly like checking flies, and
You're really hard to do.
but she's not telling anything to this investigator, or not investigator, Francois, the
Yeah.
brother-in-law, who is also talking with an investigator, and they're trying to work together to figure out why the hell Helene has just like randomly murdered her husband. She's not talking, but she's admitted to killing him. So it's like, what the
Mm-hmm.
hell is happening? So Francois goes over to Helene in this insane asylum and is like, so I know about this fly with a strange head that your son is talking about. Does this have anything to do with what you were talking about before? And that immediately uh, kind of breaks her facade a little bit, and she agrees to tell him more if he doesn't go to the police and spill more to them.
Yeah.
And but he also needs to promise to kill the fly if he
Uh,
finds the fly. And so it's like, okay, interesting. So
yeah.
he comes back. He comes back the next day, and Helen gives him a manuscript with all the details of the event. And so this next little bit will be the manuscript.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because it's a little like it's hard to separate it when you're not reading something. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
reading it; it's very seamless. So,
Mhm.
anyways,
Yeah, yeah.
here's the manuscript. His the brother Andre, um, he was a very brilliant research scientist who had just made an amazing discovery: teleportation.
Oh,
Ooh, surprise!
science.
There were several flukes, however. Inanimate objects would have certain things off about them, and
Okay.
teleporting their household cat, resulting in it never showing back up at all. It just disintegrated into the
Oh,
universe.
as you do. Yeah.
And teleporting like a little ashtray showed up with like the letters made in Japan backwards.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
So they're like little random things that would always be off.
Yeah.
After some troubleshooting, he was able to teleport their family dog multiple times without any issue, to the point where it wanted to go through the teleporter for fun.
Oh boy. Like,
Hey, oh boy.
stop testing it on your own
Um,
family pets. Like,
yeah,
jeez.
right. So Andre actually ended up teleporting himself, but unbeknownst to him, a fly was also in the pod with him. He appeared on the other side with the fly, but their heads were swapped. And your reaction.
It's like, jeez. That's like just their heads are switched.
And their right arms.
Oh, okay. What? So the fly has like a little human arm?
Yeah, yes.
Oh man, that would be amazing to see. Just like, it's so stupid compared to like, just picture like the David Cronenberg version and like
I
how
know it's so much more intense. Like
bald
I'm
it
glad.
is.
I'm glad like the sides makes a little more sense, even though it's still iffy. But like
Oh,
this,
part
no.
of me would have loved it if Jeff Goldblum played the whole movie where he is just has his body and has the Brundlefly head over top of his own head and he's just running around going
Oh,
nuts.
that would be pretty funny. So yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
So yeah, he's searching for this fly, trying to get this fly back, but he can't find it.
Mhm.
So he um he enlists the help of Helene, whom is trying to figure out why he's like disappeared. He's in his laboratory, which happens to be in the basement. That's where all of these teleporting things are happening.
Mhm.
Um, but he usually locks himself in there to work, but he hasn't been up in weeks. So Helene comes down and she knocks, and there's no response. But there's like a letter comes under the door with an explanation on it,
Mhm.
explaining that he desperately needs them to find this fly.
Oh, because he
So
wants to swap back, sort of like the Jeff
yeah,
Goldblum idea of just adding more people.
exactly.
Okay.
But it makes a little more sense because it's like, well, his DNA is technically on the fly,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
if
that
they
makes
can like go back in together, then maybe.
yeah, that part of it actually makes more sense. That like it would, I would believe that that would succeed a lot more than just adding more other humans
Yeah.
to
At
yourself.
least that is what was originally in there before.
Yeah, yeah.
So she's just she's like, okay, sure, I'll try to find this fly. And so they're constantly searching for this fly, but she
How
realizes
would you
later that
find it?
she realizes later that her son, like a week or so ago, came to her and was like, "Hey, mom, I found this weird fly with a white head." And she's like, "Oh, that's nice, honey. Let it go." So the son just like lets the fly go.
But
And
wouldn't
it's
the
like,
son notice that it's like a person's head?
no, no
Like,
one notices that it's a person's head. It's like, is a fly with a white head?
this is, you know, what?
Weird.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah,
strange. Like also
oh,
it has a
super weird.
freaking human arm.
Yeah, it's like it's just a white head. It's fine. And so basically, they fail on trying to find the fly. It's been too long. Um, I think it's only been like one day or something. And they go. She goes down to her husband, and she's just on one side of the door because the husband won't let her in.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and he gives her another note, and it's like it's too late. Um, he lets her in to occasionally give him some like liquid food. He
Oh,
asks
okay.
for milk laced with rum so that he
Oh.
can like get drunk and also have some sustenance because he
Oh.
can't eat solids. So he does that.
God.
And so she brings him like coffee or something the next morning, and he has like a sheet over his head and his arm is like in his pocket, and and she gives her the last note, and it basically says that there's no hope, like he has to destroy himself
Okay.
because he needs the fly for the experiment, and he explains basically what happened, and
Mhm.
she's just like, "Oh, just go through one more time. I'm sure it'll be fine." Like he's like, "I've." He wrote down he's tried it like 7 times. It's not gonna do anything, but he'll
Okay.
do it one more time just for her. And so he goes through it, and when he comes out, the sheet like gets stuck on the door and falls off his face
He
and his
teleports with the
hand.
sheet on his on his body.
Yes.
Like, wouldn't you be worried that like that would fuse into his DNA? Like,
Oh,
come on,
probably.
like a rag head.
Um, yeah. So he
My
comes
face
out,
is a dishcloth.
and but this time he's got cat DNA on his head now too, because the
Oh
cat
my!
that was in the universe came into
What?
and fused into him
So he has like does he just have
as
like a fly
well.
head with little cat ears?
Yeah,
What? That's so stupid. Okay, now
and
I'm picturing Jeff Goldblum with the fly head with cat ears on it, and
uh,
that should be almost that's wonderful. Just
so amazing.
the cat. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm glad the cat came back into the story. There's actually a point to it.
there was a small point to it. So he
Recalls from the
comes back,
universe.
and then of course Helene is horrified and she screams and she runs away. And
You
then
have a cat's ears.
you have cat ears. It's horrific. And yeah, and apparently like a really long droopy mouth.
Oh my god, that sounds
Um,
so dumb.
to suck up liquids. Um, so she's outside now, and then um, he gives her another note, like explaining everything she has to do because his mental capacity is getting lower and lower by the minute.
Okay, so
And the
similar.
fly, yeah, and he can't wait another day for them to look for the fly again because he won't be there anymore mentally. So
Okay.
she has to kill him. And so he explains to her how to, in typing, how to handle the hydraulic press
You like turn it on.
and turn it on and to set it so that it goes all the way down to the bottom,
Okay.
not just for the sheet metal. It like needs to squish him completely, and
What a
so
terrible way
they
to kill
go
yourself. Like
right. It's such a
slowly
shitty way to
crushing
do
your
it.
head. Yeah,
It's so shitty.
yeah, just
So, but
get a
he
gun.
willingly puts himself under it and his arm under it, or no, just his head under it, and then she squishes it down, and then realizes that her his arm isn't under it, so she has to do it a second
Oh
time,
no.
pull it up, and then put it under it, and do it a second time. So that was all that was in the
Squish it.
manuscript, and that was everything. Um,
Jeez. It's like, oh, I gotta do it
hold on.
again. It didn't smush the arm.
Yeah, and so she shared this manuscript to Francois, and Francois has shown it to the investigator,
This is
and
great.
both yeah, so both Francois and the investigator just find Helene to be mad. They burn the manuscript, and then
Oh, really?
Helene, hold on, it keeps going. Helene kills herself as she is unable to live with her
Oh my
memories.
god, what a horrible. Wow, that is dark. That's darker than the
and
Fly
then
ending. Than the
and
Cronenberg
then
version.
I
Jeez.
know.
She just kills
And then
herself.
After this, Francois finds a fly with a strange white head and buries it at his brother's graveside. The end.
Jeez, wow.
So that's the short story that was in
That's a raw
Playboy
ending.
magazine.
Wouldn't they have like
Real rough.
okay, I get a hydraulic press would like smush it really good, but when you like lifted it up and you saw this giant fly head smushed, wouldn't you notice that it wasn't really human? Like
You would think
there
so.
would be like
So, like,
fly hairs and weird things that shouldn't be there. Cat
none
ears.
of that none of that was ever established, but, like, at least in the short story, he had a sheet or, like, it was like a
Mhm.
velvet sheet around his head, so at least that was kind of covering it, and it would be just squished inside this sheet.
Okay, yeah, I
But then
guess
there's the arm, it was like that was just there,
it
so
definitely like yeah, I don't know. You think there'd be some sort of like leftover proof, like hydraulic press doesn't like disintegrate things. So you'd still see just
no,
a
it's
smushied version of it. Like it would,
just smushed, yeah, so
you'd have to like
anyway, so
burn the remains.
that was the short story, and then
Wow.
I watched the the movie, which is funny because it has Vincent Price in it, and
Glorious.
they basically kept most of the things the same, except they did change a few things that I think was a good thing because they actually just had Helene describe what happened as opposed to just like giving them a manuscript and then them like reading it. It was
Oh,
kind
okay,
of
yeah,
like
yeah.
why that
It's
makes more
clunky.
sense.
It's not
It
very
is
exciting to watch
clunky.
two guys sit around reading, reading a manuscript.
Yeah, that felt a little bit weird. Um, and it was really strange when they were looking for the fly in the movie because when they finally did find a fly, it was literally just a fly that they painted with a white head. It didn't have like any, they didn't try at all. It was just kind of like, oh yeah, it literally just has a white head. It's not anything else.
Imagine like the guy who had to like do that. That was his job, was to trap this fly and like paint its head white, but not kill it.
And they,
That'd be so
yeah,
hard to do.
uh, yeah, that would be really annoying. Um,
Fly handler.
what else?
I have.
Uh,
They showed a few clips from the movie
oh, right.
in the
There,
documentary, and that the fly costume is pretty gorgeous. It's like
the fly costume's stunning. It's
oh,
just
it's
he's got a furry just like black claw
yeah,
hand and then
big
just like
fluffy round head.
the big puffy round head and like the little things on the face. You can tell they're just like this type of a wiry thing that just move automatically whenever
Yeah,
he moves his head, like
it's
bobblehead type of
springiness.
thing.
It's
Springy. It's
so
just
good. I mean,
so
laughed so hard
funny.
the first time they showed that thing. Just like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's like sheet falls off, and it's just like this huge fake round head.
Yeah.
It's so
But yeah, so
comical looking, and he's in a
in the
lab coat, which makes it
movie,
great.
yes,
He's
constantly in
just
a
a
lab
lab
coat
coat fly.
all the time, and that's why he's like hiding his hand in this giant lab coat pocket.
It's so great.
Um, and the other major difference is um, they basically just want to arrest Helene in this one. So after she's basically confessed, they go to arrest her, and the investigator is like, "Well, the only way we can possibly see this as, you know, her telling the truth is if we actually just have the fly with the head and is because otherwise she's just insane and she killed her husband." So
Yeah, yeah.
um they're they go to arrest her, and then last minute the son finds the fly trapped in the spider's web, which is the super famous scene that people have probably seen, but this was my first time watching
Yeah.
it when I saw it. It's just like this like terrible like I don't even think it's a green screen because I don't know if that
No,
existed.
no, I
It's
think
just
it's just like they shot from the neck up and just put some
they
crap on
just
his face.
yeah, they just like I don't know, faded it on top of whatever was below it, and it's just like this guy's face attached to a fly, stuck in a spider web, and he's like, "Help
Even
me!
the voice.
Help me!" And
The spider's like coming towards
the
him.
spider is just like,
It's like, yeah, just a big fake fuzzy spider that they're filming
yes,
also hyper up close. So,
and and yeah, so Vincent Price sees it, and then he runs to get the investigator. The investigator sees it, and he grabs a rock and just like throws it at the spider.
it's
And
amazing,
I'm
just
like,
like, ah!
yeah,
They look
it's
like
just
disgusted.
yeah. And then Vincent Price is like, you know, you just killed the thing like she killed the
Oh,
thing,
that's
so you are equally a murderer as much as she is. And so
right.
he's like, oh, you're right.
I
We'll
would
just have to classify this as a suicide.
died by
That's
falling into a hydraulic press.
I know. Yeah. So they just classified it as a suicide, and
I like how he only did it
that
to save his own ass. It's like that's the only reason why he helped it.
yes, the only
Like
reason.
he didn't
And then
want
it
the
just
lemur.
it ends with them in like a garden, and the son and Helene are in the garden, and Vincent Price is there for some reason, and then they just walk off together,
And they
and
have
it's
like
like, oh, it ended, and
it's
they're
like
happy, and they might be a couple now. We don't know.
it's like
It's like
yeah, like
weird.
Vincent Price is like talking to the boy. It's like, well, Billy, that's just how things happen sometimes. But you know
Yeah,
what? I think everything's gonna be all right. And like happy music starts playing, and like they're in such a hilarious like fake yard that just looks like Leave It to Beaver, and they just
yeah.
like they just stroll
It's
away.
funny too because in this version of The Fly, the main role is actually the wife,
Yeah,
but
I guess that's
she is
true.
actually in much more of the movie than the husband is. He's just kind of like this guy that fucked up his experiment,
He's in the
and
basement.
she's trying to figure out how to save him. Like she's the one trying to do stuff and kind of coming off as an insane person searching for flies. Um,
Suck for the
but
fly.
still, yeah. Yeah, very it's a very 50s type movie.
It
It's
looked
just
very funny from the clips that
it's
they
a black
show.
and
Just
white. No, it was not black and white.
no, yeah, it's definitely color. Yeah, I
It's
remember. Yeah,
color.
it's color. It's pretty. It's
Color.
very colorful. Again, it's like it's so just
Yeah.
kind of bright and happy looking too.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a funny
And
movie.
they're like
But
in a really nice house compared to like the Jeff
yeah,
Goldblum's
super nice
warehouse.
house.
Like yeah,
They
like
say they actually say that the company that Andre, the husband, works for has too much money that they don't know what to do with. So they're actually just funding his experiment for like some air type s- segment of the company. I don't know. It's very vague, but
just have lots of money. We have tons
they
of
just have
money.
too much money. They don't know what to do with. So they're just
Too.
funding him to do some experiments, and they don't even know what the experiments are, but he's just doing them.
Yeah, okay, I'd say the explanation in Jeff Goldblum's version is a lot better. How he kind of like explains away why no one bothers him and how no one knows
Yeah.
what he's doing, and it's a little more
Yeah,
in
but you can
depth.
see the little seeds of inspiration here and there, and even like the cat, because the cat was such a big thing in this movie. Oh, I guess another difference is they didn't have a dog, but it was funny in the movie because when he disintegrates the cat, I think this was in the documentary too, where it just like he's like the cat's gone, and then he's well, where did it go? And then he looks up into the air, and you just hear like this cat meow go.
Yeah,
"Wah, wah." It's like in the universe is what it's supposed to represent.
yeah,
It's just
I laughed.
floating through space.
I laughed my ass off when they showed that part. It's so stupid.
So
But that's
dumb.
so great that it comes back in the short story and somehow reattaches himself.
I know. It doesn't come back in the movie, but I was hoping it
That
does
would have been
not.
amazing to see. Like, just
It's
this,
too far. It was too advanced for their
the world.
uh
The world wasn't ready for a half
their
cat, half fly,
yeah.
half man.
No. But yeah, like in the Cronenberg one, it was like he was attempting to add the cat in there somehow,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, well, then
But
that's the baboon cat, I guess, is what he was trying to reference, but I think
yeah,
they just, it just didn't work when it's a baboon cat, and it's just
yeah.
weird that he would just have, like, a cat and a baboon living together. I don't know for sure, but I imagine a cat and a baboon wouldn't get along very well.
No, I don't think so.
Like, yeah,
Uh,
it's like, does he spends his time like taking care of these animals, like, on top of building his
Nobody knows.
teleporting pod.
So random. But yeah, the short story is maybe it's kind of interesting. It's like 30 pages. It's not super long,
Hmm.
but yeah,
That
it's
ending,
kind of interesting to
it's
read.
brutal.
It's fine. I know.
Like in David
But the
Cronenberg versions of Gina Davis just turned the shotgun on herself and like blew her own head off, and
I
that's when the
know
movie ends.
that's what it would be like. Yeah,
Jeez.
fucked up. But yeah, and the original Fly movie is kind of funny, so that's it's a fun watch.
There's some great reactions, like this janitor discovers the dead
Yeah,
body. His reaction is it's a gif, actually. I've seen the gif used before, but didn't know that it was from the original Fly, and
so
his eyes
funny.
just go like, whoa, oh,
Yeah.
oh. He
Well,
doesn't.
it's funny too because like I didn't realize how many references are from the original Fly because like you were saying with The Simpsons how they did like a little homage to the Fly, but they did the original Fly because Bart's face and arm is swapped with the Fly.
It's
It's not
amazing.
like Cronenberg's Fly where he like starts transforming. It's
That
just
would be
like his
so.
head and his arm are swapped, and there's like a Bart Simpson fly flying around somewhere.
I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, it's just like so random. Uh,
It's a heck of a
but
lot
yeah,
easier
that's
to design.
God, that's way easier. Holy shit.
Just stick a
But
fly head on his head.
yeah, I know. I think that's everything though. We got through it all in under 3 hours.
Oh boy, just slid under that
Just
3 hour mark.
wow, we really rushed this one. It was just so fast paced.
It was funny because I was also like, okay, there's so much to get through. So like that was still a rushed version
I felt like
walking in.
I was trying to rush through it, but I couldn't.
Well, there's just so much to get through.
There's
It's
a lot there's
thick.
a lot to get through, and it's interesting, so
Yeah, hey,
it's
I
hard to
find that
rush
stuff
it.
fascinating, especially that stuff about the short story. That's pretty great.
I'm glad I could contribute non-gory details.
Right, there you go. Fun facts. You don't have to think about Jeff Goldblum's Brundlefly anymore. You just think about some stupid idiot in the lab coat with a fly
It's
head
true.
and cat
True.
ears. So every time you watch it, just think about that and the cat being lost in
Beautiful.
space.
Yeah. Excellent.
One of
Well,
the
on that
greatest
note, thanks everybody for joining us on this disgusting movie,
goop-filled
Goop
episode.
Fest, The Fly. And remember, always be sure to puke up your digestive enzymes before consuming a meal. Bye.
Ding! Bye.
All right, podcast's over.